It doesn't matter. But okay, well, here we are back again. Welcome everybody. Today we've got Mr. Devin Korwin today, and yeah, I'm excited to talk to him. He's coming from a different background from most concept artists. He's coming from like a more classical atelier background, and he does a lot of interesting stuff with his work. But yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself, Devin.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah, kind of classical. I went to an atelier for only about 3 months, so I guess that still counts as classically trained. I don't know if there's like a time limit on that. um, but yeah, I'll keep that in my biography.
Good enough.
But yeah, I currently work as an art teacher. I do private one-on-one mentorships. Yeah, and that's my main thing right now. I also do freelance concept art and illustration. Uh, yeah, I worked at Gameloft for the past couple of years, and then I transitioned to full-time doing teaching, and that's really been my main passion, and also full-time HEAVYPAINT user.
Yeah, full-time bug reports and
Yeah,
feature requests and
we were talking about how I have like 400 or 500 pages of HEAVYPAINT, and Vaughn was nervous that there would be some game-breaking bug and I'd lose everything.
yeah, a catastrophic burning down of all his sketchbook page. I think 500 must be a record. Um,
Really?
I
I would
mean,
never forgive you if anything happened to it. I would have to I'd take you to court.
one star, never download again.
Yeah, I'm keep
Mm,
holding you hostage with my review.
yeah. Um, so yeah, uh, hello Julian. Hey, hi Move Talk. Hello Dr. Strangelove. Hello 51. So yeah, what do you want to show us first? You got some little.
Let's think about it. Yeah, I was showing Vaughn some Blender stuff before. I use Blender like pretty frequently in my work. I started using it. Um, well, I started learning with like 3ds Max, and I don't know. I kind of took a break from like doing 2D because it was getting frustrating. I was like planning on quitting 2D art in general because it was very difficult and I like wasn't getting work. And I thought if I switched to 3D, it would be easier, and like I'd have the program kind of do a lot of the lighting and work for me. And it turns out that's not true. And I actually like took a tour of the Millman School in Los Angeles, and I was planning on going into like VFX and just wanted to do kind of 3D grunt work. But yeah, then I realized like that's also difficult. So I might as well just kind of stay on the path that I'm on and keep going. But it was good because I think taking a break to learn 3D kind of helped me push through a lot of like drawing stuff and like unlock a lot of new possibilities. And I think like when I get kind of, I don't know, I always think it's good to try different things. And when I get bored of like, or frustrated with kind of the visual optical side of painting, uh, going into 3D, it feels almost like a kid playing with Legos, and it just activates a like whole other side of your brain. And I think that's useful to like break down image making into different parts. Like this is kind of the constructive side of things where you get like the very accurate information about form and space. Um, but the better you can draw. I think it was Craig Mullins who has this anecdote that he tells of like if you give 10 people in a room and they all have like a pencil, it's such a non-specific tool that you're going to get 10 completely different unique things. If you give them like a very powerful tool like ZBrush, you're just going to get like a very lumpy looking alien head from every single person because like that's what the program is wanting
True.
you to make. It's kind of like learning to drive with a Ferrari or something. It's like going to make a lot of decisions for you. So I think the better you can just traditionally do things, then you can kind of keep the idea that you have at the forefront and not let the tool be making the decision. So I still struggle with that, and I feel like I still use 3D as kind of a crutch to like make up for drawing skill deficiencies. But at the same time, I think like the old masters had, they had models, and I think a lot of like modern concept artists do everything from imagination, and like that's a huge part of it. It's interesting because concept artists like do everything from imagination, and fine artists do everything from reference. And I think like the old masters were somewhere in between, and reconstructed a reality from what they saw. Like, I don't think they had the model in front of them the entire time when they were making a painting. But they did studies of it and like learned from it and took notes, almost like a shorthand for them to use for the painting. Like, yeah, just like a visual form of note taking. I think that's where a lot of like modern fine art stuff goes wrong, where it's really about like copying exactly what you see without thinking. And you can't just do that because, you know, what you know about stuff is a very integral part of like how we make sense of the world. I think of it kind of like Google Map layers, where you have like, you know, there's like the traffic data and maybe like satellite imagery, and it's all kind of stacked on top. And when we see the world, like there is that kind of touch-based information, how we, you know, I don't know, like traverse the world and not bump into things, but also like emotionally how we feel about stuff. So yeah, like when I was in the atelier, like I didn't really like just thinking visually, and I kind of got stuck in that for a while. And I was there for 3 months. It took me maybe like a year to unlearn a lot of stuff because my lines were I was just using completely straight lines, and like all the life in my work kind of disappeared. So yeah, there was a lot that I learned, you know, from the atelier and like the classically trained process that I didn't expect, and part of it just because like it's such a narrow aspect of it. It's like visual accuracy. Yeah, I could go through and show some.
Yeah, sure. Let's see.
We can talk about like. Let's see.
Yeah. So the ateliers want you to draw with straight lines, you said? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, we could look at like, so the thing with ateliers is that they really like this thing called barg drawing. Have you heard of it?
Nope.
So Charles Barg was a 19th century painter. You know Jean-Léon Gérôme?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he worked with him. I could show some of the work.
Already dropping knowledge.
Oh, Name
wow.
dropping my friend.
Look at
Gérôme.
this reference. Oh man, okay. Excited.
Yeah, so this is like Charles Barg, where like very academic style painting.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
yeah, I think Gérôme was a little bit more known. He kind of takes all the credit.
Like the Morocco stuff?
Yeah, like the Orientalist stuff.
Yeah. I love
Basically, they made a drawing course. Yeah, like some really famous ones. A lot of people know the ones with the carpet. I don't know if I can find it here.
I know you love your carpets for sure.
Yeah, I get that a lot from the Orientalist work, and I love using pattern and texture because there's this really interesting thing that happens where like when you zoom out from something, it just kind of blurs together. Yeah, I did like a tutorial thing about it. I call it like dithering, like as if it were in pixel art, you know, like dithering, like.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. You start to think in a computer brain.
It's a really interesting way to think about it. I mean, like if you think about, say, you're painting like a checkered couch or something, or it's black and white checkers, and they're really close together. You could either do it like you could blend that into a gray, as if you were standing far away from the couch and you just could see it as kind of a middle gray, or you can literally paint each one of those little squares and have it blend in the eye. And it's kind of like pointillism, you know, like broken color. That's normally what you think about, but it's true with value too, that those value groups blend together. There's a Fortuny painting. Actually, I think it's Fortuny. I don't know, probably Ramon.
Yeah, where's Ramon? We need to get.
I asked him once because it doesn't make sense. Like, this is a portrait bust of Fortuny in this painting. Like, so it makes very little sense that he would be painting himself. I don't know if he was vain or something, but it seems like it might have been after his death or something. I have no idea.
That is a serious rug.
I can open some Photoshop. You know, I think if we're doing like a study of this, the instinct is always to zoom in and like copy these very, very small details, and you lose sight of the big picture. And you can see here, there's tons of values happening. Like there's this value and this value, like a huge range of value. But if we zoom out, let's see if I can like make this as simple as possible. And turn it grayscale just to see the values. You see all that information there is like completely lost. It just turns into that gray, like the same gray as the shirt here, maybe a little bit darker. So incorporating pattern into work, I think is kind of like one of the most advanced things you can do with value, because you zoom in and there's all that crazy detail, and you zoom out and it's just part of the value structure, like the larger relationships between things. That's like a big part of my teaching, is the difference between groups versus within groups. I can pull up another example of that.
So like the local colors versus the global.
Just like grouping in general, like value groups, the most kind of non-specific sense of that.
Hmm. But then
And
those patterns though, even though they read as like value noise, I guess, or they blend out, they are still
yeah,
really specific though. Like
right,
there's specific shapes and stuff happening in there.
right. So that's why you have to, like, if it's digital, you have to zoom way out and see what the big picture is. And if you're working traditionally, I guess you like stand across the room, and that's what will happen with, like, you look at John Singer Sargent's work in a museum. You look up close, and there's just blobs. Like, he's being less specific there. This is actually fairly, I don't know, precise.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sargent, like, you stand back, and it all kind of comes together. So really, a lot of this is keeping in mind the big relationships between things. I think that's probably the number one beginner mistake in painting. I'll pull up some of these too. One of my friends let me show a paint over that I did for him, which I think might be a little bit relevant. But yeah, this between groups and within groups thing, and this was huge for me. When I figured a lot of this stuff out, it was like almost like I could sleep better at night, because I think I was really interested in, like, more so than actually painting, like knowing how it worked, like almost like taking apart a radio or something and like wanting to be able to put it back together.
Yeah.
Like those paintings I saw in museums as a kid, and you just get that, like, where it stops you in your tracks. It's like it's like a magic trick that you want to figure out how it's done. And yeah, exploring that, like, hasn't killed any of the magic for me. It's just kind of allowed me to be, like, appreciate it more, even because I know, like, the very limited tools that these artists are using to achieve such, like, ridiculously impressive things. And it's made me think that, like, probably the biggest limiting factor to my own work right now is just my patience and, like, attention span, because yeah, they're not doing anything that's voodoo. Like, all these things are completely understandable and you can break them down, but it takes, like, ridiculous dedication and yeah, attention span, really, to get back into these things day after day. Because like I said, like, and like you were saying, if you zoom out, the whole picture is there. You can tell what's going on, but then it might take like 6 months to a year of labor to get it that specific, which is like, you have to have some kind of discipline to, like, see that through and keep your end goal in mind the entire time. And especially with, like, I don't know, social media feeds and Netflix, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I use 3D a lot to, like, get this stuff for free. I wonder what these artists would have done with it. But yeah, like, I feel like I have a choice. Like, I can either kind of take advantage of these new tools, or I don't know, train my attention span. And, like, yeah, it probably wouldn't be able to post stuff every day or have something. It could even be a good thing. That's something I want to do eventually, is like, yeah, maybe go dark for a little bit and, like, focus on one thing for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how long something like that would take those guys.
Yeah, and this is actually probably, like, not that long compared to other things.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like, for every medium that we have a budget, and for digital it's actually pretty huge. So say we're talking about value, like, we have our darkest value and our lightest value, and it's huge for digital because we get, like, the screen is glowing. We're actually, like, painting with light, whereas if you're oil painting or gouache or whatever, you're limited by the amount of paint or the amount of light that can be reflected off the page by the light. So we have a huge leg up here. But that could be a good and a bad thing. It's good because you can, like, experiment with all this stuff, but it's bad because you might never realize that you have to compress information, because it seems like we have all this room to work with, that we can just literally copy what we see. And that's, I think, why a lot of concept artists don't develop these fundamental skills, because digital doesn't force you to, in the way that maybe, like, painting with gouache or something, where, you can't get the values as bright as you see them. You can't get them as dark as you see them. So you kind of have to figure out, how do you work within your budget here of, like, every gray that lives in between your brightest bright and your darkest dark. And there's an infinite room for creativity, like, within this space here. there's not one way to compress. I mean, even if you look at like very heavy compression, like a threshold filter, and this is one of like the prerequisite skills to being able to do this kind of thing, is just being able to say what visually meets the thresholds for being light in the light group or the dark group. And you could, so there's like a conceptual side of this, like what is light and what is shadow. But you might have something in the light, like this cube, be part of the dark group just because it's not reflecting enough light to be part of the lighter one. So then the next step of this is like figuring out how to fit another group into this, like, and how it relates. So once you can do this and like design with kind of these simple shapes that result in being able to compress things, it's just you do it again, then it becomes a finer and finer application of the exact same skill.
Yeah, one thing about this that I think is interesting is like I think it's much easier for humans to divide things in half and then in quarters and then in eighths and then in
It's a sort
sixteenths
of, yeah, it's such a
versus
logical way
versus
of,
like someone being like, oh, I'm gonna divide this loaf of bread into sixteenths right away, and then you're like and you're never gonna get actually sixteenths.
that's why I found teaching like this to be so like reliable and like reproducible in its effect, because it is such a logical like easy thing to follow. I use the metaphor like if you have like a pile of rocks kind of dumped in front of you and you have to sort them into two jars, and you pick like a variable, like if it's, I don't know, color or shape or whatever, you're saying you're picking a threshold, like what meets the threshold to be in this jar, what meets the threshold to be in another jar. And then after you sort that out, and he's like, okay, my two jars look very different from a distance. There's not one rock in one that like could belong to the other. You're really being kind of strict about it. And that's like a threshold filter. And you can do that for any variable. This could be color, it could be line, like the complexity of angle even, detail level, like anything we can compare and contrast. That's why contrast is really the thing that we're like manipulating when we're painting. But then you just do it again. It's like somebody gives you another jar and then says, okay, sort again and say what doesn't meet the threshold for those groups and make another one. And you only have to do that like 2 more times, and you logically arrive at the biggest relationships. Versus if somebody gives you like 6 jars and says like find all of that immediately, there's no like, and we can only do so many things at once. I mean, like eventually maybe you can become an expert at like sorting rocks into jars for some reason, but like for the rest of us, we have to do it like step by step.
We're not as amazing as we think. We gotta make things easier for ourselves.
Yeah, that's every morning I practice sorting rocks into jars to be able to do this. I recommend everybody practice.
Okay. Neighbors
so yeah,
like, what is all that noise upstairs? Okay.
Gonna start a new trend. So that's really like the concept of compression. I think compression is often like that missing link to a lot of people because it's not really talked about that much, and it's like gigantic. I think the most important things in painting or drawing or whatever, like visual communication, is knowing how to control contrast, and like very close under that is compression, because that's what allows us to have these groups that we can actually like design with. And design is the whole thing. There's another thing that I think a lot of like fine artists don't pick up on, is because when you're copying reality and not compressing and recreating relationships, and you're just like literally transcribing things down, there's no room for design. It might happen accidentally at like years down the line, but thinking like this, it happens like baked in as part of the process. Design is the end goal. That's part of what I wanted to talk about with this bark stuff, is because bark drawing in like modern ateliers has become the end goal, rather than this was used for high school students. This was a course designed to like get high school kids into the very basics of drawing, like appreciating Greek sculpture and being able to reproduce, this is compression, taking small angles, compressing them into straight lines. That's one of those fundamental skills, just like we take small differences in value and compress them into simple groups. This concept of compression applies to value, to line, to every element of painting. So, I forget why I originally brought up bar drawing, but this is just part of the process, and it's not the end in itself. It's just a way to like kind of weight train a very narrow part of drawing, which is visual accuracy. And like the more visual accuracy you have, the more you can tell when like you're constructing or making things up, like how those angles relate to each other. Like this is a face here, like we're taking these angles kind of, if this were like perspective, you pick this as a vanishing point. The difference between this angle here related to the horizontal or to the vertical too, versus this, if we change it a little bit, that could be like a mile in perspective. So that's why being able to like see, this is a way to learn how to see, but that's like for a purpose. It's not, you're just not just learning how to see so you can copy stuff. I mean, if that's your goal, if your goal is to like copy reality, then it's fine. I mean, that's like kind of the whole thing, is that the way that you learn art is completely dependent on what you want to do with it, because it's just a method of communication. There's no like, there's nothing beyond that. So I think when teaching, that's why I like teaching one-on-one, because all these principles are the same. You can't get away from contrast, like compression. It exists whether or not you believe in them. So you might as well like believe in them and practice them. But beyond that, how everybody uses this is completely different. And like the order in which you study this stuff is totally different too, because everybody's different goals. But I always think it's interesting, and I'll teach students who are interested in doing like anime drawings, and I'll teach students who want to do like 19th century looking painting, and I teach the exact same principles, but maybe in like different orders, and like explain things in a different way. I just think it's so interesting how like the principles of communication and like communicating information are the same through anything. And even like in music, like I play guitar, and noticing these same, basically grouping, comparing and contrasting different groups is like basically everything. And it's such a non-specific thing that maybe it might not seem exciting, but like when it allows you to unlock your ability to kind of communicate your own ideas, it becomes very, very exciting, versus like a trick or a process or something. Like if I show you the Blender stuff, that's stuff that I came up with after like discovering my own problems. And I think when learning, like you really need to have a very keen aware of problems. And painting from life can be great from that, because you'll be faced with things like, how do I get the sky to be, a value that I can even show painting on my cell phone in HEAVYPAINT? Like I now am intimately aware of that problem. I have direct experience with it. I can then go study and find the solution to it. And then that's my own answer. And I've like discovered maybe a process that I can use. So yeah, like my 3D stuff, it's very specific to my goals. And yeah, that's why like when we're learning, we can seek out other artists who have similar goals and learn from them. But we never have the exact same goals, because you're different. You're a different person from everybody. And that's why I think like there's something unique about learning art, because you can't just copy someone's exact path, or else you just wind up as like a slightly lesser photocopy of them. And it's like, what's the point?
Interesting. Yeah, so it seems like you're really into like the almost like the behind the scenes, like nuts and bolts, almost engineering type of science aspect of it.
I love that side, but it's interesting because I would say the other half of my teaching is completely like intuitive, or like even like emotional, sometimes like art therapy, where it's talking about like, because that's just half of it, like the technical stuff. The other side is really like the visual communication. It's like, what do you want to say with this stuff? And that can be difficult. You kind of have to be in tune with what you want, and like explore your own interests, and kind of, there's like confidence, I think, involved in being able to do that. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of issues obviously come up around that stuff, and I think it's just as important, probably more important, because that like dictates how you go about learning the technical stuff, and even like why you're learning it. So again, that's really why I like painting, because it uses both like the intuitive and emotional, and also it appeals to like, I guess, both parts of my brain in that sense.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I feel like painting is a little bit more expressive. I mean, not expressive, but more emotional by nature than, say, drawing. And you can, but it is still very technical. Like, it just seems like somebody looking from the outside at art might be like, oh, painting is just like emotions flowing out onto the canvas,
right.
But it's actually like very calculated and very structured sometimes.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like writing. It's like, it's very structured, the way that you have to learn how to write and like learn a language and be able to like express yourself coherently. But like that does not teach you how to be Shakespeare or something, or write anything of like, intellectual or emotional significance that really comes from a different place, just using that very structured thing. So I do think like kind of even the contrast between that is what I find really interesting.
All right.
Yeah, I think with lines, like that could probably be more on the intellectual side because lines are really good at communicating like the boundaries of form and space. There's really like no difference between line and like areas of tone in reality.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
if we had a line here, this could just be communicating like that there's this dark cube behind it, and just like not doing the whole thing. Or it could, so that would be like appealing to our sense of sight if we have this, or it could be appealing to our sense of touch and saying like there's a boundary here between this and this. Like that could even start getting in the way of things. If we think, okay, there's definitely a boundary in space between this cube and this, so I'm going to make them different values. This is where a lot of people get into trouble because in reality, again, you zoom out, those are the exact same values when you
Yeah.
ignore all the small differences. So even now, I'll know, okay, this object is maybe like 40 feet behind another one. I have to make them different values, but then I'll think like, no, actually, I see them as the same. So yeah, they start to influence each other, like what you know about stuff and what you actually see. And
I feel like recently I've been like seeking out those kind of situations where things can possibly blend into each other, and anytime I see it, I'm like, ooh, juicy, and I try to grab it, and I'm like, let's snap those two values together and call it a day. Let's time to go home, guys. We finished.
It makes it feel visual rather than tactile, and it also is like a more advanced looking thing to do than kind of having everything be like that kind of stick salesman composition where things are progressively lighter as they go into the distance, which is a very effective tool, but can become a crutch again because it's like such a narrow situation that happens in. But
I always enjoy looking at paintings that have that too, because you have to do a double take a little bit and think about it. You're like, what's going on there? That shape is weird. It's like a weird abstract blob. But then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's what it is. It's like when you look at it in the context of everything else around it, then it all of a sudden it makes sense, and you're like, oh, cool. They like somehow simplified it. And
it's really like a magic trick. Like we know that these are objects, but we're compressing them into shapes. Like it always starts conceptually. Like I know that there's a boundary here, but it winds up optically, and now our new boundary is like this. And we get a shape like this, and also a new shape like this. So you kind of have to like, there's no like evolutionary advantage to thinking this way, like normally. It's something that we have to learn because it's not intuitive to think like, to start seeing this stuff. So it's really like a big shift in thinking to start seeing visual relationships. Again, I think most like concept artists are more used to thinking constructively, and probably most fine artists are used to thinking more visually. And the reality is that these are two sides of the same coin, and it doesn't make sense to like get into camps about it because they're both very, very important. So I think so like you can group this stuff together and kind of ignore these small differences. Like again, just like we looked at that carpet, there's differences in value here, but when you zoom out, the difference between this and this compared to this and this, these are basically the same. We can say that's not an important difference compared to those. So this is the difference within groups, or between groups, because this is basically just going to average out. And now we arrive at something like this versus that versus that. So when you get your groups, you rarely need more than like 4 of them. You can think about the exact differences between those. And that's really super important. And our instinct is always to overstate this stuff. Again, if you make one incorrect decision, like that this is different, those decisions compound on themselves, because then you're going to compare something to this, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
You know, something I feel like I really struggled. I mean, like I totally struggled with all these things you're talking about when I was learning digital painting. And I think one of the big things is like the sliders were too small. Because when you make a change with these sliders, it's so big. It's so big of a jump. It's like almost impossible to make that very, very subtle, like, proper change that you need.
Sometimes it might even be better just to type it in, because you're right, like the correct change in value for like this wood grain here is like 1 point on the value slider. And it does take, again, like some discipline to be able to move that just 1 point.
You have to be
That's a big part of practicing. But I think the new Photoshop has slightly bigger sliders, and there's like there's plugins, I think, too. I'll use this sometimes too, the color picker. I have this tied to a hotkey, so I can kind of think about everything at once. This is more of like thinking of color as kind of a 3D space, and you're moving value and chroma and saturation at the same time. And you just kind of get used to these different flicks and like relationships and how this relates to here, and that you're like kind of navigating 3D space. And I think it's a little bit more intuitive than these sliders. And RGB sliders, I have never gotten used to. I understand the logic behind them, but like
you are missing out. You're missing out because
I tried so hard.
Especially with value, it's so nice because if you think of the three the three sliders all add up to value, right? So it's almost as if your value slider is 3 times as long now because you have 3 times as much real estate to describe value. You know what I mean?
But you also have to move 3 sliders to change the value.
Yeah. But you have 3 times as much accuracy with those 3 sliders. Your values will be much more subtle with RGB.
It's really interesting. I think it's a different way of thinking in the sense that when you're using, this is kind of like the Munsell system. Hue, chroma, value. This isn't quite value because this is not white. It's more of, I don't know how the math works behind it.
Yeah, but, that's the other problem is saturation and value are both value. Because when you do less saturation, it's higher value. So it's like
I'm just used to thinking like
value.
Yeah, if you increase the saturation here, you're darkening the value. You have to know that you have to get the angle here to get the same. So I do kind of get it. It's arriving at things in a different way. I think kind of like bottom up of like getting the value and then getting something about the color right because you have something about the value correct. Whereas I think RGB is more like you're getting the value, you're getting the color, and as a result of that, you're getting the value correct because there's only one value that color can be, if that makes sense.
Maybe. I don't know. It's more direct. It feels more direct because I'm telling you, man, the HSV it feels like you're fighting against yourself sometimes when you're sliding the saturation around. You're undoing what you did in value, So it's
yeah, I use that as like kind of intentionally to play with. I think if say I have a gray and I want to warm it up, I'll do this and then compensate for it just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm so used to thinking like that. I don't think I would, because this is kind of like paint mixing too. Like traditionally, you kind of, I guess you add the paint from the tube, you modulate the value a little bit to get it, to be the same value string that you're mixing on the palette. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I talk as if I'm a traditional artist, but I have no idea.
Oh man, there's some people in, let's see, there's RGB Gang, there's Sparcelino, Move Talk is RGB Gang. We have few RGB Gang that are gonna get you next time you go out. And then there's also Lab Gang. Have you ever used Lab Color?
Yeah, I have. I gotta watch my back. All these gangs are after me.
Have you ever used LAB Color before?
The last time I tried it was maybe in 2013.
Okay. I've never
used it. This is now okay. So this is now lightness. This is now the actual literal measure of, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. But yeah, if this is at 100, it is now going to be as white as you can get. And then this is like temperature almost.
Oh my God, people are about to shank each other in the chat right now. Everybody's going crazy. Okay. Colorblind Gang. Oh yeah, what's the best for color? I think I've actually gotten feedback from colorblind artists who said that the color box is the best way for colorblind because you can place it coordinate wise.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is the most logical thing to use because it's very obvious that this is the 3D color space. I think the sliders are all various degrees of compromise, whereas I mean this is still a compromise because you're not navigating 3D space. I think that would be really cool if you ever wanted to program some kind of 3D color box that you're literally
It would
let's
have
see,
to go in and out. It would be like left, right, up and left,
you
right,
can
up, down, and
have
in
like
and
a
out.
system of pulleys that you use.
Yeah, like you use your toes to
Yeah,
change
and
the
you have
flight.
foot pedals.
Foot pedals. Uh, you slam your forehead into the screen to
You can use like
eyedrop.
your it can track your eyes too. But if you've made something like this that you could like navigate around,
Oh, okay. All
maybe with
right.
like a WASD or something, like first person shooter controls.
Yeah. Okay. Can fly around it there. Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sometimes I'm just like too lazy to pull up the color picker and I'll think more on this. But it's interesting because these are so small, you're more relying on like your knowledge of the relationships. Like I think how like maybe Beethoven when he was deaf was like thinking about the intervals between things less so than like experiencing them. So I don't even know if like I almost find it distracting to have these too big because I'm just like look at the pretty colors
So
versus
you mean you would rather be deaf and composing music, or you'd rather be blind while you paint? Is that the idea? Like, or you'd
maybe
rather not see the colors until like the painting's done and then it's
maybe
revealed to
just
you?
a little bit blind. I'll like kick sand into my eyes a little bit just so I don't have perfect
Okay,
acuity.
I'll add that
Actually,
into heavy paint, a blind
yeah,
mode.
you push a button and it just shoots sand into your face. uh,
Okay.
when I first got my glasses, I almost found it distracting to have things be in such focus,
Mm.
and I would take them off for the first stages of the painting so that I could see the big effect. And it almost took me a little bit to like get used to ignoring all of the new acuity.
That
I
does
think that's
seem like it
probably
would
what's
help.
helpful.
Yeah, it does seem like it would help to have less information when you're painting.
Yeah. So I would do like 30 minutes of a still life maybe without my glasses and then put them on and then get like the high frequency detail.
Yeah.
But I realized that like I can actually that was almost again kind of a crutch. Like I can see color and value relationships better with my glasses, and I just have to kind of learn to tune that stuff out versus literally sacrificing some of my vision.
For me, I like to just work as small as possible. Like
Oh
just
yeah,
super
yeah.
tiny thumbnail, reference really tiny, piece really tiny, and only zoom in like if I need more stuff later
Same.
on.
Yeah, I find the instinct again, especially if you're using like a Cintiq or something, is to blow it up and then you're like hunched over the screen and working in a tiny, tiny area, and then you get this tunnel vision and you start this like piecemeal kind of seeing. And that's why I really prefer using an Intuos, especially for painting. Like line work can be kind of painful with it. But with an Intuos, you can like sit back from the monitor, you can make this really small, and you work at it like at the size of a postage stamp.
Hmm.
And you know, when it's this small, you can see these big relationships. Like, okay, this and this are obviously the same. But even objects that aren't touching, like the light side of this cube is the same value as the dark side of this cube. And that's more obvious when I'm looking at the small. And all these small details of the pen and this stuff, they all disappear. So I can get the big relationship between this and not worry about the wood grain. So this wood grain is information within. So basically, like, I want to find if I have two groups, it's arbitrary that I'm fitting information onto these lines. If I have more than two groups, I all of a sudden have to relate the third group to those. And now we start to get like a lot of freedom and you get ratios and like, is it up here? Is it down here? Or do we like limit our overall range, like move these guys in? So that's the relationship within groups. First, you have to compress stuff to even arrive at these groups. Then you find kind of the relationships between them. But here's the thing is that when you start doing all this wood grain and stuff, it makes these lines a little bit wiggly. And the number one beginner mistake is to have way too much wiggliness and not compensate for it. And then all of a sudden, so like say we have groups like this, like we have make something that's not impossible to see. We have four groups, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we have a little bit of wiggliness, information within, we can still tell that these are different groups. But if you start to get uncontrolled in your contrast here, all of a sudden this is going to look like a straight line. Then we no longer have differences between those groups.
Yeah.
So like the big thing with the way that this works is that as these lines here start to get more wiggly, these have to move.
Like they can't overlap, basically.
You can't get too close. You have to keep kind of the same relationship. So yeah, if they get really wiggly here, then this has to get really far, and all of a sudden you might run out of your budget. So for example, like say this is a light to shadow relationship. If we just use no pen pressure, have no contrast of color or value. That's part of why I love heavy paint, is that your color dynamics is like a contrast slider. Like the more you slide that slider up, the further apart your groups need to get. Because as we increase that slider, this gets more wiggly. And if you make it really wiggly, then this probably has to go wiggly too. But it's going to go all the way down here to keep it the same relationship. So then we have this to this, and then we start clipping. So we have this like budget of information, our upper to lower limit. And as you increase the contrast within, the groups have to expand to get further apart. So if you want to show a ton of information in your painting, keep your groups really low contrast. And that's why practicing painting without pen pressure is really good, because then every decision that you're making is intentional. So there's no contrast in here that I'm not intending. Whereas something like this, look at all these overlaps here that are creating contrast. And even just like training your brain to get used to noticing where is there contrast, where is there not contrast. That's really important, to be able to just like sit with your painting and notice this is a flat area of value. This is a not flat area of value, and this is calling attention.
What about, let's say your rug is very wiggly, right? Like there's a lot of high, frequency variation in it. Or let's say you do have something like a rug or something where you do want to have a lot of variation, but your budget is very limited. So then how do you deal with that? Do you flatten out everything else that's not the rug and like sacrifice those things?
Yeah, so let me show you some examples. I mean, I was picking randomly here. I mean, you can actually see how low contrast this stuff is. Like, this is just a flat value group, basically. If you zoom out, there's this really clear dark gray, black, lighter gray. Anything we can see can be compressed into these value groups, and you might wind up with gradients. But if you find the correct, values that those gradients are blending between, then your gradients are going to be accurate. That's like what you were saying, like cutting a loaf of bread into 16 pieces first. Like do it in half and then keep dividing it. That's how you get accurate kind of soft transitions between things. So I can show you, I think, what your question is. Yeah, so this is a Hollis Dunlap painting. He's really good and is on Instagram if you want to follow him. And I think that this is what you're talking about. Like, if I look at your face right now, like there is no amount of contrast in your face that is even close to as dark as like your pupils. So here, the difference between these brushstrokes, like this brushstroke and this brushstroke, gigantic. Like in reality, probably he was seeing something extremely low contrast. So I think that's what he's doing, is intentionally increasing the contrast so that you arrive at these very clipped. That's like this, where we have all this wiggly information here, and we have to get the shadow relationship correct. We got to go all the way down here to get it. Whereas if he kept things closer, we can only fit both of these within our budget. So I'll show you another example. But basically, yeah, if we wanted to start to have information here in the shadows, or like show information in the pupil or something, we'd have to reduce the contrast.
So either the light or the shadow needs to be compromised in order to properly showcase.
You have some choices. Like you could raise up the value of the lights, and that might like start clipping it. I guess that would be something like this. So that's a choice you can make, where you're now just raising the whole thing. You're like taking that relationship we had and just like transforming it up. Or you could reduce the contrast between both those groups. We just do a bunch of these, and it opens up room in both sides. So instead of like crunching things and clipping things, you can get a ton of information. You can like separate these highlights out, and now we can get all this reflected light in here. We can get like a tiny bit of form. But you see, like, one of the benefits of clipping things, like clipping can be good. Like guitar distortion is clipping, and that's like a whole genre of music that it created. It's not always a bad thing. It's bad when you do it unintentionally, because then your relationships are wrong. Like if we had reflected light in here and information in the lights, like that's wrong because the relationships are off. But but you get this very kind of high contrast image that reads at a small scale. So this might be good for like, you know, card illustration or something, or very punchy looking fine art. Like I know he's interested in Caravaggio's work and the chiaroscuro and showing form. This is really great for showing form in the lights versus something like this, where this is extremely low contrast, the Sorolla painting in both the light and the shadow. And it's kind of like an HDR photograph. But the difference is
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
The relationships here are accurate. Like in an HDR photograph, it's like copy pasting in a different exposure. Whereas, you know, it's very accurate here.
So HDR is like you're getting the wiggly parts and sort of artificially like sorry, let me get in front of the camera. You're getting these wiggly things and like bringing them closer to the center.
Yep, exactly.
Like that.
You're taking this. You can have, look how many groups you can have now, because since there's no wiggliness here, we can still tell that these are different groups. So yeah, we can have tons of information here inside the shadow. I mean, the much more traditional way of rendering this would be, we lose all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, especially like on a hot, sunny day at the beach.
Right. Either you pick the light or you pick the shadow. And I was amazed at this because like I once heard Craig Mullins say like, you know, I'm practicing kind of the HDR kind of thing. It broke my brain because I thought like, you know, what do you mean HDR? Like that's bad. That's against the rules. And it made me think like, okay, maybe there aren't any rules. They're just principles that like convey different things.
So were you taking Craig Mullins' class or learning from him?
I forget where I heard that. I did take his mentorship, maybe it was 4 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah, he kind of introduced me to a lot of these ideas about contrast, and yeah, it blew my mind about like starting to think about some of this stuff. And yeah, I just didn't like, I didn't realize this was a thing for so long. And he came along and like was saying, okay, this is a thing. And it's crazy how little we can like, how we can overlook stuff for years and years. Like I've been getting into playing more classical guitar, and I've been playing guitar for maybe like 13 years. And I never realized that there were two different types of like vibrato in playing guitar, that there's a difference between like, you know, Jimi Hendrix doing vibrato and like, you know, a classical musician doing vibrato. And I would think like, well, what I'm doing doesn't kind of look like what they're doing and doesn't sound like what they're doing, but that just must be the way it is. It like never entered my conscious brain to like Google it. And then one day it did, and I realized like there's a completely different technique. And I could have made much better use of like, I don't know, many years. So that's a big part of why I wanted to teach, is that like introducing these concepts to students when they're first learning, it saves so much time, and they can reach like their potential much sooner and reach much higher levels. And like, it's been crazy to see some of my students doing like ridiculous work, because I don't think that this optical stuff takes too long to learn. Like the stuff we're talking about, grouping and contrast, I think once you're aware of it, you can maybe become an expert at it in like 3 months if you practice it every day. And like 3 months in the grand scheme of like becoming an artist is like nothing.
It's nothing.
But using this stuff takes like a lifetime of practice. But it's like, yeah, it's like learning correct grammar. Like again, like doesn't take that long. But learning how to write a novel or something like that's a different story. But yeah, there's so many artists like that are just using incorrect grammar, and so they don't have to be. It's limiting the amount of work it's limiting the type of stuff that they can do. And a lot of like artists will compensate for really not knowing the mechanics of the language through process, through saying like, this is the one thing that I know how to do, and it really means that I can only have certain amounts of ideas. And like certain students that come to me have been like industry professionals who are not beginners, who have been working for a long time, but they only know how to express one idea because they only know one process. And that could be really frustrating, especially when like you're making money from it. You have this financial incentive not to be thinking differently. It's a tough place to be in. So I think as early on as possible as you can learn these non-specific tools, it allows you to do whatever you want with your career. You could like be interested in something one day, and then all of a sudden you get bored of it. It's like, cool, I'll do something else. And like, as long as you do it sincerely, other people will pick up on that, and like you'll start making money from that. So I think working from that rather than like, what does the market want from me? I'm going to learn like a specific process to target and make my work look like that. it's really limiting what you can do in the long run. I think kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I agree. I try to like preach that as much as I can too on channel, just saying
Yeah.
like self-learning is, you get so much out of this stuff, and you can go so much farther, especially if you're like just following your passion, no matter how cheesy that sounds, but there's
Yeah,
something
it
to it.
is about following your passion. It's like a self-confidence thing too. Like it takes confidence to be able to follow your passion, to like not do what other people are telling you to do, because that's the safer thing. But again, like I think that it makes you have to undo things in the long run. So yeah, I think kind of the scarier decision of going into the unknown and just following what you're interested in with no guarantee that people are going to like it is really the safer decision, because there's guaranteed like difficulty at the end of the other road.
So what about you? You started with you did you study like concept art in school before the Florence Academy, or how did you end up doing that stuff?
Um, no, I didn't. So my formal kind of education was I started seriously painting in like 2013. Well, I was planning on being a dentist actually.
Oh
I was
shit!
going to take the other path.
Wow.
Uh, because yeah, like I told you, I was very frustrated. Like I did not have the confidence to think that I could do this for a living, for whatever reason. And uh, I think it started like I went to a big public university and in Boston, and it was an art program. So I did decide to be an artist, but like it was so not what I thought it was going to be. I think on the first day they put my work up on the projector in front of the entire, initiating class. And so like this is what you don't want to do. Because
Oh
I was
my
like
god.
I had like studies of Sargent in there, like
Oh
representation
jeez.
stuff. And they were like totally on the conceptual art side of
Oh
things, like
no. They probably like put you back a few years with that shit.
at that point I was basically like, I can't do this. So I
Oh
kind of
no.
stripped a little bit. And then my dad and my brother are dentists, and they tried to convince me like you could work with us and you'll make a lot of money, and like you could paint on your 3 days off from work a week. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So I started taking
It
like
does sound
psychology
good.
classes, neurobiology classes. I know it's kind of what I was interested in, but I figured I could take mostly bio stuff, chemistry classes. I can get my prerequisites done and apply to dental school. And yeah, so I graduated with a bachelor's of science in psychology and was planning on applying. And I was working in my dad's office, and I just like it was okay. I just had no passion for it, and I couldn't. I got really depressed thinking about doing that for the rest of my life. So I basically felt like I didn't have a choice. Like now I have to tell my parents like, can I kind of stay at home and practice? And yeah, that's when I decided to start doing. I think the first thing I decided was I'm going to do a still life every day,
Mm.
because I just had to like I didn't really know where to start, and it was kind of like exciting because I had no idea what I was doing, or I mean I still don't. It's kind of where I developed that skill of like I don't know, just figuring out kind of the next step to take. And I was like starting somewhere. I'm going to do a still life every day, and yeah, eventually that started to kind of snowball, and I would post my work online and met like similar artists. And that's what I was telling you. That's when I went for that massive black convention in Los Angeles, like after
Man,
my first year of practice.
2013 is not that long ago. Like, it's pretty amazing that you're doing all this, like, at this level that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I painted and drew before that, obviously, but this is the first. That was the first year that I said like I'm gonna do this every day and like actually practice for the intent of doing this as a career versus like I would paint like maybe a couple times a month and not really take it as
Damn,
seriously.
that's awesome. Makes me feel super
So
lazy.
yeah, then I was targeting like these very low paying kind of card art type jobs and like fantasy kind of illustration I just wasn't super interested in, but it was what other people were doing and they were making money from it. And I thought like this is kind of what the market wants and I'll tailor my stuff to it. And I got no responses. It was very demoralizing. Like, yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I was just like frustrated. And I think at the Massive Black Convention, yeah, I got a portfolio review from like Tom Scholes and Teo Prinz.
Oh
And
man, nice.
they were doing the kind of work that I thought was really exciting because it looked like there was nobody else doing something like that. like they weren't targeting some style, they were being true to themselves and making something unique. I was like, that's what I want to do. So at a certain point, I was like, I'm going to stop kind of chasing the validation of trying to get these jobs and just have fun with this. And I started doing like more abstract stuff, thinking about more about composition and less about, I don't know, targeting a composition to some specific thing. And yeah, I started to have more fun with it and enjoy my work quite a bit more. But I was still no closer to getting any kind of any kind of work from it, because abstract stuff was like not there was no market pressure for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at that time I took a mentorship with Tom Scholes, like officially, and we worked together for a few weeks. And yeah, let me think. So yeah, I was really kind of running into a roadblock, because like, what do I do now? Like, I told my parents I wasn't going to become a dentist, and like I had that kind of pressure on me to like move out and like start doing stuff. And that's when I think I started going to the atelier, because it was like, I know my drawing skills like aren't really supporting any of this, and I thought, there was a lot of artists that I really looked up to that went to ateliers, and like we went to like Safe House Atelier, and
Yeah. Like Wes Bird and Carla Ortiz and all those
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Who like some of my favorite artists. And I thought like I would be doing that, but I realized now that like Safe House has had that kind of entertainment art focus to it, where a lot of those classical or like modern classical techniques are used in service kind of a bigger thing. And really what I kind of focused on at the atelier was that optical kind of specific site size drawing, which isn't super relevant to like making up illustrations. If you have the model there in front of you for like 30, 40 hours, it's very relevant. But if you don't have that all the time, it's not really giving you many tools to work with as like a working artist in the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, after I graduated that's when, or just did 3 months of that, that's when I did the mentorship with Craig Mullins to kind of ask him a lot of questions about things that I was thinking about there. And yeah, it kind of made me think about things in a lot of new ways. And it didn't like answer all my questions, but got me thinking about a lot of stuff. And it was, that was really, really valuable. And I think pretty soon after that, I started to get more freelance work, and got my job at Game Loft and moved to Montreal. And yeah, now I'm doing freelance and teaching, and yeah, I really love teaching. I mean, I want to keep that as kind of a big component of what I do.
I think it's always cool when people sort of have to customize and design their own learning. Like, you kind of just picked and chose the stuff that you liked and followed that, and you ended up with something kind of unique, where if you go to a school which is like a one-stop shop, everything all in one spot, you don't have to, it's not as customized. It's more like a factory style thing. So it's always cool to see people that are like experimenting with that.
Yeah, there's a certain school I'm thinking of that is definitely like factory, and I get a lot of students from there who have portfolios that are identical to every single student that's graduating, and yeah, that's not helpful long term. So a lot of what I work with those kind of students is like the more expressive side, and like, what are you interested in specifically? What do you want to do with this stuff? Because there is like a lot of technical foundation there with like visual communication type drawing, and like that's good, because I don't love like teaching perspective. It's like not one of my strong suits. Like, if there is already strong perspective skills, it's like, okay, we can kind of talk about other stuff. But yeah, I usually just try to identify like where is kind of the biggest issue, and like, is it in knowing what to express, like how to have ideas, or does the student already have a ton of ideas and just not know how to like communicate them very efficiently?
Do you have any one thing that like you're 99% sure that an incoming student will get a lot of value out of? Like,
yeah, a lot of this grouping stuff I usually talk about. Again, like the number one kind of beginner mistake. I mean, I can show you, like with this paint over, for example.
Oh wait, let me bring you back up on the screen. 1 second. There you are.
So yeah, like we talked about, have you ever heard of like the loudness war?
No.
It's a thing in music mixing.
I can
Basically,
imagine.
that like over time, songs have started to be mixed to the point where like all the information is clipping. Basically, like there's no more dynamic range left to like compete with stuff in the club or like on the radio to just be louder. And this is similar. Like you can see here, like the budget, like the upper and lower limit of our information. I think the beginner mistake is having all the information again just be nothing is grouped. It's clipping in places. Nothing is relating to anything else. So like this is a very common problem, and the way to fix it again, the instinct is to go into levels with all your work. If it's not working, well, I'll punch the levels and make it more exciting. But what that's doing is actually making the problem worse. It's taking those incorrect relationships
I'm guilty.
and amplifying them to the point where they clip even further. So what you actually have to do is go against your instincts and reduce the contrast. Let's think about this as if it were a song. I think maybe that's helpful. Maybe it's confusing. I don't know. But yeah, so if this is a song and we're looking at this, like we can't make sense of the information. So then we reduce the contrast, and at least we have information above and below. So there's still no grouping, but at least we have room to work with here. And then the way out of this is to then have, okay, identifiable groups. Like maybe this is the first verse, and you can start to see these concepts of between and within. So here's our verse compared to our chorus, and we have information within and between. So verse, chorus, verse. Then we have like a bridge that kind of drops the energy, and an outro that gets super, super intense, and then the song ends kind of where it started. Now at a distance, we can see a contour to this. So say we wanted to like make the outro here more intense. Well, we could do this, but like that's reaching the limits of what our perception is. We're now starting to clip beyond that. So instead of that, we can actually reduce the contrast between these, and then perceptually, that's going to seem even more intense. So it's understanding how your groups, both between and within, relate to your overall budget of your upper and lower extreme. So this could be value, it could be color. You have like graphs like this kind of stacked on top of each other simultaneously, simultaneous contrast for every element of painting. So if we look at this now visually, yeah, the way out of this is to reduce the contrast. So we still don't have groups, but at least we have information above and below to like work with. And then after that, you can like start to reassert the differences between things. So this is kind of where I took this to. And if you look at the difference, I mean, this is generally like now we can actually see differences between things. Things are relating to each other. And it's really about getting things back towards the center to be able to work with them. So that's a very common thing. So really if somebody is doing like very optical kind of painting, that's very relevant. But this concept, again, applies to like lines and stuff. So somebody is doing like line work and has a very, I don't know, cartoony or stylized thing. The same principles apply, because I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, you could do like a beefy arm or something. Like you could have a lot of angle changes going here. Or in stylizing this, you can just compress these curves into straight lines. And then where you have kind of a lot of angle changes, that is going to become like more interesting in comparison to a bunch of straight lines, if that makes sense. Like it's the same kind of concept of grouping and budget and how it relates to contrast of angle and how it relates to contrast of value and color and edges and like everything. So yeah, I think that's a thing that I'll usually talk about with everything, because with everyone, because it applies to every kind of style that you want to do. It's just like visual communication.
Yeah, that's like some life knowledge there.
Yeah, and again, like I think about kind of I thought more probably about composing music than I have about performing it. And I think thinking about performance has been kind of a new thing, and it's the same thing of like how do you group the volume that you're playing, like so that when you get to the intense part, it seems like that in comparison to something else. You always have to keep in mind like your upper and lower limit and how you're playing in relation to that. If you're playing like a guitar solo at 9 volume, you can't go higher than that. It's not gonna have any perceptual kind of difference. But if you're always playing or hovering kind of around a 5, any change you make is gonna have this like ability for dynamic range.
Yeah. Let's go up to 11, I guess.
Yeah, or you go up to 11.
Oh man. 51 IP says, "By God, I think I get it now." This is great.
Yeah, do we have like any questions or anything?
I think people are just like absorbing the knowledge. They are a lot of Montreal people popping in. I don't know if you maybe you know these guys from
Montreal crew.
Montreal.
I mean, like the pandemic started pretty soon after I got here, so like a good part of my second year in Montreal has been mostly spent in isolation.
Let's see. Rima says this wave metaphor is sometimes too abstract for me. I need to see some more examples. Do you have any more
examples? I think.
Oh, and also some.
You could look at the 3D stuff.
Yeah, MoveTuck wants to see 3D.
Okay, yeah, we can take a look at that.
And Vampiro.
My computer Max build.
Cool.
Yeah, I was telling Vaughn that I've been trying to upgrade my PC for about 6 months and I can't find any parts. It seems to be getting worse. Like every kind of month I check back, the prices of video cards are getting even more ridiculous.
I feel like by now the only way to get one of those RTX cards is in a laptop.
Yeah, or like you buy a pre-built.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not demoralized enough yet to buy a pre-built.
So you're a nerd. You like to build your own computer too?
Yeah, very nerdy.
All right, I see.
Do you have like RGB on your computer? Is yours glowing and like lighting up your whole room?
RGB? Oh no. I have a Craigslist computer actually. It was like this guy's office was closing and he was selling a bunch of computers, so I bought a few for a render farm a while back. And then
really?
Back when I was doing a lot of Blender, and then I ended up like selling the other two.
Yeah, because it's like really limiting what I can do right now. Because I think in 2D, like if something forces you to slow down, sometimes that's a good thing. Like I have kind of like sometimes it seems like I'm operating a spaceship if I'm working. Like I have shortcuts for all these menus set up here, and I have all my commonly used brushes set up on my F keys, so I can like really quickly change between stuff, and I get kind of a rhythm going with like clacking the keys. But sometimes I think like, is that working against me?
I have an opinion on this now that I used to also be very, very hardcore about hotkeys, right? Like, because you feel like you're in the Matrix and you're hacking and you're painting and everything.
Yeah.
But then I started to watch like some really good painters, how they paint, and like sometimes they don't use the hotkeys. And I think actually using the pen all the time to like go to different menus and go to around the screen in general helps to sort of calibrate yourself.
Right.
And also having your other hand, I think your drawing hand, your other hand is actually important too. Because when you have it on the keys, it's like disconnected from your drawing hand. You know, like when you draw on a sketchbook, you hold the sketchbook there, and like that, your body kind of knows, like it calibrates.
Body-mind connection.
It calibrates based off like where this other hand is. So I find like if I'm drawing like close to the tablet, or I'm holding the tablet, I actually get better drawings, and I'm more accurate.
So do you intentionally like not set up shortcuts or hotkeys and kind of
Yeah, yeah.
click on
So
them?
I sit really far away from the computer just with my tablet and draw like no keyboard because I feel more comfortable and I feel more like connected to things without the keyboard actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think sitting far away is one of those big things. And that's what like in because I'm more used to doing things digitally and like with an Intuos. So when I have been practicing like using charcoal or something, like just figuring out like the best ergonomics for getting my brain to be in the right place for working. I've been thinking a lot about that. And I'll talk to like Ramon about a lot of this stuff. My friend Ramon Hurtado, you should follow, who has amazing
Yes, follow
anatomy
Ramon.
stuff. And yeah, he'll often just be like, "You're totally overthinking this."
No,
You kind of just,
I agree though. I'm super. Oh shit! Can you hear me still?
yeah, I can hear you. You lost your video though.
Well, yeah, I'm really touchy about ergonomics, as you can probably tell. Like, I think it's super important, and I'll waste like hours and hours and hours, or even years of my life, like making a program just because ergonomics. You know,
Yeah,
because
I'm
I think it's
definitely
important.
more on that side, and I'm almost a little bit jealous of people who are like who don't really think about it or just are more intuitive about it because it seems more relaxing.
Yeah, that's true. It's our
uh,
curse. It is our
yeah,
curse.
I think your video something got messed up.
Yeah, I'm trying to fix it. It's okay. Go on without me.
Yeah.
I'll just be in the darkness.
I did want to ask you like because you were so good at like painting and programming and 3D. Like, what was kind of your progression in that? And I think that's like such a rare thing to be operating at such a high level for all of these different things.
Um, let's see. Well, my first love was drawing, so I always loved, in school I went to design school, so we didn't really do much painting in school, actually. So it was all like constructive, perspective, technical type drawing. And then from there, we also did a little 3D, and I feel like 3D and drawing is pretty similar because you're, constructing stuff, building
Right,
things,
right.
building shapes. It's more like engineering ish. And I've always had like an engineer in the back of my mind too. I've been into that stuff and like Legos and model kits and
Mhm.
building stuff. So I think eventually, like I wanted to be an electrical engineer when I was little, which is a weird thing, but my uncle was an electrical engineer, so I was like kind of into that stuff and RC cars and all that. So eventually got into. Well, I've been into the technical side of art. I think like kind of like how you are too.
Mhm.
I think that stuff is really interesting to me. Maybe to the detriment of like the more expressive side. Like I don't really have any cool stories or deep meaning in my art. I kind of just appreciate. I just really enjoyed sort of the technical part of it, and
Yeah,
yeah. So that's kind of my progression. Went from drawing to 3D to painting to programming now.
it's interesting. Yeah, it's probably about what I would have expected. Because I do think like drawing and having that foundation there is really important for knowing how to get the most like out of 3D. Yeah, I think like with the story thing, I think you can have your story like be about the technique. Oh, there you are. I think that's like what I get from a lot of your work is like, yeah, the story kind of is in the decisions that you're making, and like I think it's like a very valid kind of way to be communicating what you find interesting. So yeah, like it doesn't have like when I think when people talk about narrative, that it has to be like I don't know that you need like a lore book or something for like the images that you make. It's
Yeah,
not true. Like if you were go out for a walk or something and you see like you notice something like wow, that's a very cool contrast between the cool if it's like the sun setting and you get like the cool sky and like the warm glow of something you just notice that looks cool like that's a narrative that you can express like using the tools of the language so yeah it doesn't have to be some kind of like big complicated thing
yeah.
uh, let's see a question what's your opinion on students trying to get a style too early and not expanding their knowledge pool well you develop a style through having things that you want to do and then studying in order to achieve those. So like there's no like one size fits all thing for learning art. Like that's why those factory schools don't work and all the students wind up with the same thing. Their style is like the house style. What happens in ateliers too. I think that's like the worst thing because you just wind up looking like a photocopy of your teacher. And it's like you have to get out of that or you never get out of that. I think it's like a tragic thing. Um, and trying to focus on like a style is again like putting the cart too far behind the horse. Like you kind of just think about what you want to do, find problems, and then think about problem solving, and that happens kind of automatically. But yeah, it's like you can't just focus on style, and you can't just focus on the knowledge pool. Like they all happen as a result of doing things as a result of problem solving, if that makes sense.
Well, I also want to. I feel bad about my little factory comment because I think if anyone takes any class, they're gonna end up with work that sort of, is similar to their teacher probably. It's just that, I guess, yeah, if everybody's going through the same curriculum, their stuff will probably look similar. But so it's nice if people are able to like really customize their curriculum and
Right.
try out, weird different things in order to get a
Yeah.
different result. I'm not saying that like one curriculum isn't inherently gonna
Right, yeah,
give you
I
one
agree with
result.
that. And I also don't think it's a bad thing for your work to look like your influences. Like when I was first starting, my work looked like a photocopy of like Whit Brockna, and I was like copying everything that he did, like those cloud paintings. It was like everything that I wanted to do. I remember I got a portfolio review in Los Angeles. I think it was like I forget Carl Kapinski, I think maybe was saying this. It was like this looks like Whit Brockna, and like he was like, kind of laughing. And
That's a good critique, right?
yeah. So I think like early on, like it's very natural to look like your influences. It's like again, if you notice artists who are doing things that you want to take from that, and like, but eventually you grow out of it, and like you start doing your own thing. I think the problem is that when like a school gives you a teacher who you might have nothing in common with, and they teach something that is irrelevant to your long-term goals, yeah, like then that's an issue because you're never going to grow out of that because it's never related to what you want to do in the first place. So there's nothing wrong with like looking like your influences. And yeah, I think that's kind of the best way to learn is to look for teachers that share similar goals to you and customize your curriculum and seek them out and learn from them. Because yeah, if like a school is just kind of giving you a list of teachers, it would kind of be a miracle if all of them were directly related to the exact questions that you had that you wanted to solve and your goals. You still
Agreed.
with us, one?
Yeah, yep. I'm here in spirit. We can see your screen though, which is what matters. So you can go ahead and.
Yeah, I could show you like a kind of simple walkthrough of this painting that I did. Yeah, there was like a ton of 3D involved in this. I can pull it though.
It's funny. I never would have thought there was 3D in any of these pieces. Like you totally fooled me.
Right, that's kind of what I want because I think again, like if you know kind of the way that these optical relationships work, then you can just take the information you need from the 3D. And I feel like the way that I use 3D now is entirely as a crutch like for my drawing skills. And if I could do the kind of like amazing architectural construction that 19th century artists could do, I wouldn't have any kind of need for 3D. So it's that, and also it allows me to kind of get my ideas down pretty quickly, and I don't have much of an attention span, so that's again pretty useful. But I think maybe long-term goal, that's something that I want to learn from all of this 3D stuff, and maybe eventually get away from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the painting, and I was initially inspired by a photo that my brother took at this real place in Vienna when he was on vacation. And I think I did an initial sketch of this. Let me look for it. Yeah, so this was my initial sketch. So I did this looking at the photo. Yeah, no 3D, just kind of looking at the photo. And recomposing a different composition, like thinking about maybe like a loose study basically.
Mm.
And then I think as I continued it, it got to someplace like maybe around here. But like at a certain point, I was kind of limited by my drawing ability. So when I went to 3D and like really recreated everything and used like all the tools at my disposal, like Marvelous Designer for cloth and stuff. Basically making the kind of like reference that 19th century artists would have with like models and going out in the field and doing studies. And working this way allows you, I think, to not spend 3 years on a painting. But like that is again something I'm interested in. Like looking at like Repin's work, he could do a sketch probably in like 30 minutes, but then spend months studying, making studies for the figures, and then another 2 years painting the final thing.
Oh God.
So yeah, I think like I don't know, that's not commercially viable, and so this is kind of the solution that I found for it basically. But again, that was like the problem that I ran into that I needed a solution for. So yeah, like really the better your 3D skills, the more they can make up for like where the weaknesses are in your drawing. But again, I feel like my strength being in kind of these optical relationships, I can take this 3D and know how to like uh, make things relate to each other in a way as if it were somebody looking at it. So rather than like the objective information from the 3D program, compress things and remove information in a way as if you would have to do it as if you were looking at it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So then basically, yeah, you have like perfect reference. I mean, you could also see I had like these Cassini paintings up. I really like this dichotomy that he has of like comparing these structural, very appealing to the sense of touch kind of things, but there's also these very optical gestures that happen, and like the contrast between the small shapes, big shapes. This is like the grouping that we're talking about. How many big shapes do you have versus how many small shapes?
Yeah, they
Uh,
still feel very graphic, almost like very reduced in certain areas.
yeah, you can see the compression. I mean, really, you can do these in two values. You zoom out, and it's just like this slanted kind of cylindrical shape.
Yeah.
So compositions, really, the simpler they are, the simpler the idea that you're comparing. Say it's like your idea is like a curve versus a straight line. That can be very powerful, and not to like overdo it. And that's kind of like I like that analogy that you use. Like you slice the bread in half first, and then you can find all the smaller slices, related to all of that.
All right, I'm gonna copyright that.
I'll have to pay you royalties.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love
Yeah,
that shadow, how it just disappears there. Such a sucker for that.
yeah. That's kind of the thing of like taking this stuff about compression and like knowing that I could lose that and it gives me budget elsewhere. Versus in the 3D, it's going to give me all the ambient occlusion under there. And it's interesting because Piscini, like, he keeps all that, and you get this really strong, solid feel to it that is like really appealing. And like Alma Tadema does a lot of this too, where he'll outline a lot of the architecture and it's just like very in your face about how solid it is. Especially, I mean, it's a very classic thing to do of like maybe you have a very solid architecture and then the gestures of the figure within the painting contrasting that. I think it might be interesting to kind of do the opposite, where maybe you have very kind of organic looking architecture and like a city of robots or something, and like what is
solid
the
people, stone people.
yeah, or just
Man,
statues or something, and it could be
man,
maybe kind of
imagine how cool it would be to see the photos for these, or like if there was a photo, what would the photo look like of one of these?
probably, yeah. I mean, like I'm trying to think because Alma Tadema did work from a lot of photos. Maybe I can Google it and see. So some of them do exist.
Oh, okay.
Especially for like the props and stuff that he used, like statues. He had huge photo reference archives, basically.
Do you have
There were
yourself
some.
one of those, a DSLR or something, or you
What's
use
that?
do you have a DSLR or do you use your phone for pictures?
I just got a Sony mirrorless camera, so I haven't used it for anything yet. I've mostly just been
Ooh,
playing with photography, but
cool.
yeah, I before that I just basically used my cell phone for taking any kind of reference. But yeah, photography and like thinking more about lenses, it's been a whole new world. I don't know. I don't know if I could find anyone. I had to like I think it was an article in a book. I was really into Tadema, and I was living pretty close to Princeton University in New Jersey. and I saw that they had this out of print catalog of his work, and it was at the Princeton Library, like at the university. So I went there, and I was like, I mean, I wasn't a student there, and I basically walked in. I was like, "Can I please look at this book?" And I kind of had to sneak in a little bit because they wouldn't let me. So I snuck in and then took a cell phone picture of every page of this book. And I think that's where this was. But there was an article in it about how he used photos uh, to.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Trench
I,
coat.
I would recommend like getting interested kind of in art that's not on ArtStation, because there's so many interesting ideas through history, like really like standing on the shoulders of giants, like not reinventing the wheel, and kind of learning and getting interested in things
One
beyond kind of the immediate circle of concept art.
one little trick for anybody who's doing phone photography for their paintings that I have been really getting into recently is like just put your phone camera on pro mode and then play with the ISO, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
really helps you to compress stuff because you can like say, okay, I want all my shadows to be like one value, then you put the ISO really down low,
yeah, yeah.
and you automatically get that compression that we're talking about. Or you can go the other way, and it's really fun to kind of like also sort of develop your taste in like what you prefer in certain lighting situations. Like, maybe you like the darker stuff, maybe you like the lighter stuff, but it's fun to see it that way. It kind of like auto paints for you, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the exposure kind of analogy is really useful. But painting, you can do so much more, because again, like with photography, you can control the differences between groups, but you can't as easily control the differences within groups. So like that thing with that Sorolla painting that I showed, I mean, like he can control contrast in a way that a phone or a camera can never do. I mean, like if you look at this painting, like the the value of the dress here in the shadow is like the same value as the pants here in the light. He'll do like these ridiculous relationships that you think should never work, and like that kind of HDR one that we looked at before. So the camera analogy is like a really great way to start thinking about relationships and compression. But what makes painting so cool is that you have like complete control over the contrast, and you're really just limited by your imagination and how you can manipulate those to convey something.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, this is examples that I have in my book. I don't know if there's a good one on this. Yeah, like you can see, I love Alatanama because he paints in these two like completely different ways. Like a painting like this, or maybe this is probably a better example to look at. But yeah, I think this is good because this portrait of his daughter,
Jesus.
it's a very like personal subject to him, so he paints more in that optical kind of way with maybe a shorter lens. You feel like she's here with you, and you get a sense of this being like one moment in time in his house. It's very personal, versus his historical work where like he has outlines on things and more appeals to that sense of touch, like more of like pencil, like that drawing kind of thing, where it feels like it's appealing to a very different thing. It's more intellectual. I think, I think it's very intentional. There's an example I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely a super different feeling from them.
Like these two paintings, especially because they're the same exact subject, it really, really shows it. That this is painted more in the optical way of like pure visual relationships. You get these like soft edges, and it's more of like how shapes of value relate to each other. Here we get the idea of things like outlines.
I think I have a metaphor for you.
Yeah.
On the left is, well, not perfect metaphor, but on the left is Michael Bay, on the right is Wes Anderson.
Yeah, it's funny because Wes Anderson does a lot of those like perfectly symmetrical compositions. I think he does try and appeal to like less of that more intellectual side of things. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the reason again why he does this more, like this is multiple exposures. Like if you look at the scene, you can see there's like blurry stuff here in the background. There's nothing blurred here. This is all perfectly sharp, as if it were taken by a camera or multiple exposures. If you're looking at this, if you look here, you get all the detail. You look here, you get all the detail. And because there's equal amounts of detail everywhere, her face doesn't seem very detailed compared to everything else. It's just flat feeling. This, there's significantly, like, her face here might be even less specific than this, but it feels more specific because there's so much non-specificity around it. So here the groups are much different. So I think here he's really trying to say, like, look how interesting all this furniture and stuff is. It's like a very kind of intellectual view of appreciation of the past, like all these props and stuff. And she's almost like you're not thinking about what she's thinking about while smelling these flowers, whereas here you are. It's more of an emotional component, just entirely in like the sense that he's communicating as he's painting this.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
But I can open up a Blender scene also.
Yeah, you should. That one you showed earlier was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I can open it up. So yeah, this was a thing I was playing with. I was looking at a lot of like Jan van Eyck. I think I'm partly like really into this stuff because it's so far on that constructive side of things, not quite as optical, and I think because I'm not naturally as attuned to it, I really appreciate it. So yeah, I'm looking at a lot of Van Eyck's work, and yeah, it might take a minute to open again because my computer is like
it's okay.
Maybe over a decade old.
You're like Ramon, man. He's got an ancient computer too.
Really? Well, he's not using Blender on it, right?
Oh, I guess not. You're like Ramon in the future, in a few years in the future.
I come from the future to warn him of his visions. How's your camera doing?
It's misbehaving still. I'm trying to figure it out. Let's see. Come on. Oh, there we go. Jeez, it's like if I even breathe on it, it turns off. But I'll try not to breathe on it.
Wait, I still don't see you. Wait.
Oh, I'm only on the stream for right now, but I'll just imagine I'm like smiling and very interested.
I always imagine you smiling, even not on the stream.
Actually, I'm very sorry. I have to go to the bathroom. I will be back in like a minute. If up to you if you want to. Sorry, I'll be right back.
Really can't wait. Apparently, I can look through and see if there's any questions. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? I haven't used grease pencil much. And no, I don't think I'm bringing the beard back, unfortunately. I got that out of my system.
What happened? Oh, beard? You
Yeah.
had a beard?
The chat is clamoring to bring the beard back.
Which of your tutorials would you recommend to start with?
That's an excellent question. Self-promote. Yeah, so I would start with, I have 2 ebooks. I would start with, this is the first one, this is the second one, but you can really start in any order. I think the second one has more of the stuff we've been talking about today. And the first one is more a collection of, you just read the contents basically. It talks about the stuff, basically either one. And yeah, you can kind of go at your own pace with those. And I'm working on making video tutorials more this year. So yeah, these are what I would start with. And then I also have some just like process write-ups for some of my older paintings. And yeah, if you want to get both the ebooks and schedule a mentorship, you can use this handy option. Okay, so yeah, this is probably the 3D that I went like most crazy with. And yeah, I used some like 3D scans that I rigged up. I can't remember if it was in like Mixamo or Blender.
Scan from where? Museum?
3dscanstore.com.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So yeah, they come in like T poses, like you saw when I opened a new file, and you can just kind of rig them and move them around. Um, yeah, I mean, like I went into the detail that you're never going to see. I mean, you can see like the ridges on the pants and stuff. Like I just kind of
Oh,
have fun with it,
geez.
and yeah, like the texture of the stuff going on here. It really, like you said, like playing with Legos. It's so much fun using that other part of your brain, like constructing things. That's why, like these things on the shelf, like thinking about like these geometric solids. It's like
Mm.
uh, it's so satisfying in a way that pure optical painting sometimes isn't immediately, and you don't really get that sense of solidity, and they get into like 30, 40 hours into a painting. So 3D, you can play with that immediately. Like this window, I was really getting inspired by like Van Eyck stuff. Yeah, like and you look at any of these, they have these window things.
Oh, man. That's awesome. You actually, like, recreated it. Perfect.
Yeah, so wait, like this painting is crazy. Just like everything going on, like back here, just these all how specific these shapes of are
I
outside
never noticed that.
the nails in the wall and like the soft light. It's absurd. But yeah, you can see the same stained glass stuff happening here, and yeah, you can see Van Eyck in the mirror here. I think his signature basically here says Van Eyck was here, and he would sign his stuff. He was so confident. He would sign his stuff saying like, it was the best I could do, like at the time, like kind of false modesty. He knew how amazing he was.
What a
But
bastard.
yeah,
No.
super inspired by this stuff. So I went into Illustrator and like made the flat kind of vector design of the window, made different maps for kind of the shaders, and then compile it all together. This is just like normal maps that I use with the bump node
Oh,
here in the shade.
man. Devin knows about normal maps, too. He's unstoppable. Jeez. Wow.
So yeah.
Oh, and on the bench too, right? On the like the wood side of the wooden bench,
This guy.
carving.
So this I drew this. Maybe it's still in a folder
Is that
somewhere.
Photoshop?
I did it in 2D, just drawing. Let me see if there might be the actual texture. In 3D code, you can use black and white images as like a stencil, like a cookie cutter almost, and
Yeah.
cut it out of voxels.
You can do that in Blender too, I think.
You can do voxel stuff in Blender.
Well, I mean, you could use it as a height map and have a
Oh
bump.
yeah, that probably would have made more sense. I mean, like here's some of the maps that I used for this thing.
Cool.
Yeah, like this is just what I made in Illustrator.
Damn.
Oh, so it's interesting how you don't put shader on the skin. Is it intended to be white later? So normally, if I'm using 3D, I don't go this crazy. I mean, this is really helpful for like this kind of thing, but I never really do any kind of skin shader or subsurface scattering because I want to rely on my experience in painting from life for that stuff. I want to be able to take this and when I'm painting it, like not have all of the work done for me. I still want to, especially I'll often not even use any kind of color. I'll just use two values maybe for the drawing or something, or a black and white render, and invent all of the color, because then I'm bringing, I have to bring more of myself into it. So I very intentionally don't do much work on like the hair or the skin because I want to be able to do that. And I guess like even applying that same logic, maybe I should practice to the point where I can like plot these patterns on fabric myself and like get the difference between the velvet. I just use like black and white masks here to mask out what is the metallic shader for this and what is the velvet material. I mean, like, yeah, I can use that same logic for being able to do all this other stuff. But yeah, I have more experience painting from life, like models and stuff. So I think I know more how to deal with that information. So, oh yeah, so the yeah, it helps with specificity. And often, like, I would really just I used to just do a completely loose sketch. So I have an idea before I ever went into 3D. Yeah, because if you go into 3D too early, it's again starting to dictate the idea. So it took a lot of practice just doing abstract kind of 3D drawings or 3D, just abstract paintings and developing an idea through that, and then going to the 3D and developing the specificity. So only very recently have I been able to like do this more like thinking of like a movie director and like set dressing and then finding an interesting shot with the objects that I have in the scene. So like you should start abstractly, have a composition that works abstractly, and then figure out the excuses for for that contrast with real objects. I think enough experience doing that, you can then, and this might be opposite for other people, but like then you can start with real objects and get an interesting abstract composition out of that. I don't know, maybe other people are more comfortable one way or the other, but that's kind of how I had to do it to be able to be comfortable with making abstract decisions about contrast. Because it's really hard when you have all of this information here, like huge amounts of information, to then compress all this stuff. So I think it's easier to start with the very simple end of like, two values that have to relate to each other versus all these materials and stuff where it's not as immediately obvious.
Could we do, or are you planning to do like a little demo of taking something like a scene like this and compressing it, or
Yeah, I could try and do that real quick.
or maybe not
Maybe
this
just
one, but
like
some scene?
how I could. I mean, this is the thing I did in Photoshop, and
Yeah.
I had these two: a height map basically, and a stencil. And in 3D Coat, you could just cut this out of basically a piece of voxel cookie dough, and then extrude this, and then you arrive at something like this. But
Hmm.
yeah, if you can do that in Blender too. But no, I did the cloth in Marvelous Designer, and the texturing was in Blender though. But like the actual modeling of the cloth was in Marvelous Designer.
Nice.
So yeah, then I got like a bunch of different paintings out of this. I don't know if that's even fine. I can just look on my site. Yeah, so this is like using more of the 3D. This is more of the compression kind of thing. You can see I'm now thinking about like compressing this group into here, and, how these values relate to each other, and this one too. Versus this, which like I want to kind of retain more of that sense of touch to it. But it's cool. I also kind of just like having this little diorama, I guess, to play with. And so kind of like how James Gurney, I think, uses like traditional maquettes. Like he watches his
Oh
videos
yeah,
of
yeah. The little puppets and stuff. Or
yeah, like puppets and birds out of paper mache and like really cool working models where like you'll pull on a string or something and like the wings move and the tail articulated, really crazy stuff. So yeah, I think it's really important to be able to kind of think about that more constructive side of things.
yeah, I think 3D is a pretty basic, essential tool that everybody should have. It's like, it's just that it's always been seen as like, technically prohibitive, but now I think people will warm up to it with, all the YouTube training and Blender and all that. Like, it's gonna be much more common.
Yeah, but I think my only caution is like really it's like don't learn to drive with a Ferrari or something. Like you want to be able to have those skills and being able to paint from life first before you can even know what to do with all this stuff. So yeah, it can really easily become a crutch where the tool is kind of using you and it's not doing anything in service of your idea. So I think just kind of the easiest way to have all of this crazy amount of information relate to everything else is again, like I said, like have every decision be intentional. So if I turn off pen pressure, and just think in two values, what meets that threshold? It's really like thinking like a human threshold filter. Because now everything here has to relate. And when I'm looking at the scene, kind of what I find interesting is maybe this kind of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of information here that I would not keep. I would want to design and like consolidate a lot of this stuff, but really that shape here and kind of a drawing of what's going on here and compressing not only the values, but the gestures and lines of things. So now we get light on dark for the window. And what's going on here? Maybe this is now also light on dark, or kind of reversing it. Now I get dark.
Yeah, I love that flip-flop stuff. The zebra.
Right, like counter change. Well, my friends were making fun of me because I was looking at my window before I pulled the picture. And I saw this tree and how the light branch here suddenly turns into shadow, just as behind it, the shadow turns into light. You can see it here too. So light branch, shadow, but this is shadow and then light. It switches like perfectly. So that's called counter change. And if you're thinking with too many variables, you're never going to, why did it rotate?
Some good stuff right there.
You're never going to be able to like make those design decisions. So the more important design decision here is like, well, we get the shadow behind it, but we get this branch here in light, and we get its shadow right here. And it's like now we have design, and with very simple compressed groups, you can start thinking about that stuff. So like, if branches start coming out here, we can, that kind of thing, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty sexy. Yeah.
So yeah, all my friends called me a nerd because I took a picture of this and was very excited about it.
It's okay, man. We understand you, I think.
Yeah, it's okay. My self-esteem is shattered. Yeah, so I mean, like that's kind of the thinking that that I will do. Reminds me of Sargent's painting with palm trees. Yeah, Gurney's windmill effect is a very similar idea. Yeah, I think that has kind of exhausted a lot of my knowledge about things.
All right, got it. Black and white, flip-flop. I'm ready to be a painter.
This will be on the quiz.
You gotta make up your own. So Gurney has a windmill, and Sargent has his palm trees. What is your thing gonna be like?
Well, the interesting thing is that you can expand that windmill thing. So here we have light on dark, but
a solar farm.
Wait, I'm gonna blow your mind. You see how now this is warm on cool, so you get simultaneous contrast happening?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can do this kind of windmill thing with everything that you can compare and contrast.
I actually I don't know the windmill thing.
Let me pull it up. Yeah, this windmill thing blew my mind. This was probably one of the most important articles that the windmill principle. It's also inspired me to come up with these. Oh wait, this is literal windmills. Do I thumbnail compositions with heavy paint? No, I mostly use heavy paint for painting from life because I can take it with me with my cell phone and paint anything in front of me. So thumbnailing I will mostly do in Photoshop. Okay, so James Gurney's windmill principle says, and I had no idea about design before this. I always thought about things as objects. So if I were painting a windmill, I would have never thought to have dark on dark. That wouldn't have entered my consciousness. It would have been kind of this is a windmill thing and like what value is it going to be because of the light, but not never thinking about like how that actual optical value might relate to something else. So
Yeah, I
and when
got
I
it.
saw that like you
Oh,
can make intentional, sorry, what was that?
oh, nothing. I was just thinking, like, man, Sparth does this so much. Sparth is like all about this thing,
Oh
also.
yeah.
The
Yeah, that you can like you can almost have abstract appeal make up for your ability to construct things, or like say like you're doing life drawing and like some part of it just looks goofy, then you could just change it and not make it look goofy and like design it better, even if you don't know what you're looking at. On the other hand, the more you know about what you're looking at, the more confidence and like structure and the more function you can provide, like believable function you can provide. So there is this like relationship again between what you know about something. The more you know about it, the more you can come up with convincing actual things. And the more you know about design, the more you can have those convincing things have appeal. And like they can both support each other where they're weak. And that's again why I think like focusing on one exclusively over the other is not the best way to go, because yeah, they're two sides of the same coin and they work together. So yeah, here we just have this part of the windmill going either into a dark local value or it's going into shadow and merging and becoming the same value as the dark value here. Whereas here we have the windmill in light going over a cloud. So we get contrast, and here we don't have contrast.
yeah,
And here we don't have contrast because these are the same and these are the same. Here we have reverse contrast where it's light on dark, and here dark on light. So
it's pretty good stuff.
yeah, it's like every possible combination. And basically, when you compress things and have simple enough groups, you can actually effectively make these decisions. Whereas if you don't realize that you like have to compress these values together, you're never going to have this overall read even happening, and you're not going to be able to design the overall composition of the image. This kind of composing is like musical composing. You're like deciding on intervals. Like if you're writing a song, kind of like what I was doing before was like writing a song but saying it has to be played at this exact pitch. It's like music is not about writing down literal pitches. It's about writing down the distance between notes.
Yeah,
And you can play those,
relationships versus
right, you can play those
absolute.
notes in E, and they kind of just go around in a circle. You know, painting, we kind of like run out of our limit of how we can show things, but it's the same concept. Like you just might start to clip things a little more severely versus the musical analogy. Where rarely, I guess like with a piccolo or something, we're getting into areas where we can't even hear some of those frequencies. Do you think there's a chance to overanalyze compared to painting intuitively and adjustable as good? It's really both of them. You can paint very intuitively and then make the same mistakes over and over again because you're never analyzing. You can also paint very intellectually and never like think more about what you're actually doing with that. And then it's not really going to have any kind of appeal to anybody because it's going to look like a technical exercise or something. We're going to have to employ is draw attention to objects is visually interesting. It's not about the one object. So it's not about the windmill. It's about how the windmill relates to the sky and how all of the elements create a bigger picture. Do you recommend sending your monitor to a certain color space for creating visual content? I don't like thinking about this stuff because I think it can drive you insane. I think you might wind up kind of like in a cave and shunning the outside world if you think too much about color spaces, because really it's all relative. And like unless your monitor is like yeah, calibrate your monitors, but unless it's like really really off, just like you're going to compensate for it anyway. Like if you're thinking about relationships, again, it's like I said with like deaf Beethoven, like you can really work based on relationships that you know, and you know it's kind of the cherry on top that you can even that you can see them. So yeah, like if you're colorblind, like you know that this is, you can memorize this is where yellow is, like you know different spots in this and kind of have it tell you what these relationships are. So yeah.
Oh, sorry. Like also, you keep in mind that everybody else, you could have the most perfectly calibrated monitor, but nobody else will have the same calibration as you do, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't think about it much unless you're working for print or something.
Yeah.
Do most of your paintings start from external inspiration, like photos or real life, or do you ever just sketch and see what happens? Both, and I think both are important. When I was first exploring this stuff, most of my ideas came from stream of consciousness painting, but it's very unreliable. 90% of the time, you're going to get nothing, and 10% of the time, you're going to get some genius idea. But you can spend hours and hours on this thing. Like I would stay up all night painting lateral moves, and like I would feel like I just spent 8, 9 hours painting. I made no actual progress on anything. Turns out it was progress, but it could be very demotivating. So I think if you only do that, it's not very like efficient. Versus if you had like some kind of brief or something where you actually had a goal you're working towards, you weren't trying to discover the goal as you went. You can work a bit more explicitly or like confidently towards that goal. So the goal of like exploring abstractly is to find a goal, and because otherwise, yeah, every decision is just equally valid. Like you're not moving towards anything. So I recommend doing both. Probably now I'm more inspired by like real life or some kind of or like reading books or like having some kind of goal. I do less of the stream of consciousness painting, but yeah, I do kind of want to get back to it. When making paintings similar to the Orientalist paintings, how do you find compositions of your own? Yeah, that's kind of like the skill of doing a loose study or something, where like you take, again, like the windmill, like knowing that these are not objects. This happens to be a windmill, but that's like the magic trick of painting. It's a windmill, but it's also just a flat shape on well, the monitor or the page. So you have to keep that in mind simultaneously. You have to know about the object and forget about the object at the same time. And when you can do that, whether it's from real life or like a photo or a reference, you can then recompose, you can break it down and then build it back up in a new context. So rather than copying, you recreate relationships, and that allows you to design with them. So yeah, practice doing that, and then you won't be limited by the shapes that you were seeing in, say, your reference painting or the compositions that they have, because you can really, composition is, we have a width versus height, and how do lines relate to that? And you can like make your new relationships within the composition. So yeah, design really always has a goal towards something. What do you suggest for this? Yeah, so both painting stream of consciousness, just kind of playing with the tools and seeing how abstract stuff relates to each other, but also not just copying the shapes that you see, like using real things as excuses for contrast and then recomposing and designing with those things and those shapes. I still struggle with the handling of halftones. How do you make sure that they don't get too messy? I seem to over-exaggerate them too often. Yeah, that's like what Vaughn was saying, like you always want to kind of make these big jumps on the sliders. Focus more on the between the groups rather than within the groups, and you'll naturally start compressing things. But probably the best advice, I remember Daniel Chavez was doing a stream when I was first learning, and he said like, the best advice I could give was like keep your values close. Like that's exactly it. Like just keep your values really close together, and your brain will start to readjust and start.
Probably a lot closer than you think.
Yeah.
Like beginners will go way, way, way too far usually, I think.
Yeah, even now, I will be surprised at how close values are and the fact that I'm overstating them. Because like I showed you that. Especially this kind of thing, if I can find it again, where knowing that this is a different object than what's behind it, you'll overstate this difference. So yeah, it's not something you ever stop doing. You always have to kind of be vigilant about it.
So would you consciously try to maybe squish them closer just to
like things, probably good advice is, if you make things that are close even closer and things that are different even more different, then you'll probably get it more accurate than as if you tried to get it exactly as what you see.
Ah, I like that. Sounds good, actually. I'm gonna try that. Yeah, I'm all about those tricks that like kind of correct for our human nature,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we have things that we just naturally do that we gotta like offset.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, the way that our vision works is entirely based on contrast and seeing differences between things. It's like how we navigate the world. Our cells in our eyes see visual contrast. So that is very important to us. So like trying to switch that off is something you have to really practice. And yeah, it's just not intuitive for us.
So that means if like a tiger ever is trying to sneak up on us in the wild, as a trained artist, you'll probably die faster because
Can you imagine how useless it would be? Like a lion sneaking up on you and say, "Wow, the color of the lion, like it's the same value as those trees behind it," and then you get eaten.
you're like, I love the color vibration of the stripes on top of the
And that's
mane, and
that's the
it's like,
last thought that you ever have.
oh, uh, yeah. Sorry. So I'm trying to apply what you've been saying to a picture here. I'm gonna
Yeah, do you want
see if
to
I can.
show?
Oh, okay, but it's pretty. There's not really much going on, but I'll show. Are you on the stream somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's a little laggy, so I might see it a little bit later after you put it up.
Okay, I'll put it up now. I'm gonna try. Yeah, I need to figure out the strategy for this because we need to compromise something, right? Um, so maybe, but then this photo already looks kind of crunched a little bit.
Well, that's the thing about, photos is that they're already heavily compressed. And working from real life, you have a huge range of information that you have to then compress. So that's again why working from life is kind of the best way to practice these things. It is a little bit easier from photos because a lot of that work is kind of already there. And like if you're displaying it on the same monitor that you're looking at, it's
Yeah, it's a lot easier than life for sure.
okay. Yeah, I can see it now.
So yeah, what would a good if you were gonna sacrifice something on this picture, like would you make the darks lighter here?
So I can kind of just take a. I can show you the way that kind of I see this, which might be different from what you see, and like again, that's useful. Like there's no correct way to do this because it depends on what you want to convey. What I see is some very discrete value groups of like this. So this is the same as this, but they're different temperatures, which is the same as this, and I'm squinting, it's the same as this. Maybe this too might be groups there. Now I also see, I think I want to group that darker actually. So like this dark group here, here, and then we get this. This is all together also. And now the sky into this. Probably just with 3 groups you can do this, and maybe 4, like here into here. But getting used to comparing things in this way, and then you can just kind of find those groups and then find the exact differences between them, and then later on you can get like these smaller color differences within here.
Yeah.
Oh, it says I'm not sharing my screen because I think you took over.
Oh shit! Sorry guys. Oops. I was watching, but then nobody else was watching. Sorry. Let me put that back on. There you go.
Oh yeah, squinting and zooming out. You can't zoom out from real life in real life, so squinting is obviously the answer there.
Can you show the overlay you drew again?
Yeah. Wait, is it sharing my screen now?
Yeah, yes, right, guys? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I was comparing like this is all the same group, then this darker group, and then this lighter group. You can probably get away with really like 3 values here. So yeah, I would focus on like not just grouping, but what are the exact differences between those groups, because it has a lot of implications for like the difference between light and shadow and like what the actual energy of the light is. It says a lot about the environment too. I think that's often overlooked as like the important differences between these groups. Whereas a lot of artists do it arbitrarily.
Yeah.
So by arbitrary, I mean like picking this value, and this value. It's like, okay, now I'm doing a 3-value composition. And no, it's still arbitrary because the difference between these has nothing, they don't have anything to do with each other. Like maybe this is this, then this is this. That's very, very different. So yeah, I think that's another kind of common pitfall of like what concept artists do, because often like value studies or simple value groups, like you're not actually studying anything because they're arbitrary.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my god. Okay. Well, a few people just subscribed and that noise is like freaking me out. But thank you for subscribing, guys. Holy shit. So you would group the far back trees with the mid-ground trees, right? Because they are kind of close.
You can see it's the same value, like the light side of these trees. So like this value into here, but I would make them different temperatures.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try that. So the background one will just be a little bit cooler. Or redder.
And that's that thing of like, how are you able to change the temperature without changing the value? That becomes important.
Oh, right. Shit. I think it's working. Maybe a little bit brighter. Can you hear that sound, man?
Very faintly.
It's crazy. Yeah, I feel scared. I always feel scared like adding in values inside of a group because it's so easy to like ruin your structure that you set up.
The most terrifying thing.
Yeah. How come like this stream has been going for 2 hours and then all of a sudden like all these people subscribe like right now?
Yeah. What happened to
I have no idea. This is so weird. Well, anyway. Hello, everyone. Oh, it's louder than the voices. Sorry, guys. I hope you're not blasting your eardrums. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you feel like doing now?
I don't know. It's up to you. I don't know. I don't know how much gas I have left in the tank.
Yeah. Well, how about like 5 minutes of painting this thing, try to make it work, like with all the stuff that
apparently you're on trending on Twitch, so maybe we should stay on a little bit longer. Oh wait, not on Twitch. Is on but
that's bullshit. We're not on trending on anything.
What are they subscribing on? I don't understand how anything works.
We're on YouTube.
So that zombie comes up when someone subscribes to you on YouTube?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But for some reason, like, anyway, I don't know how it works either. You can tell how much experience I have with people subscribing by how bewildered I am. I'm like, what does that sound? Like, oh god.
You'd be like, no, it's okay, Vaughn. They can't hurt you. Devin, do you ever get mentees that are extremely new to painting, or most of them have been doing it for a little while? Yeah, everything in between, like complete beginners to like industry professionals, and yeah, I really enjoy like the challenges of both of them. And it's like it's crazy how I really do talk about the same stuff for the most part. Like the beginning, the fundamentals, like the basics, are the advanced stuff. It when you start getting to advanced things, it's just like technique and like specific artist processes and things you can maybe take and incorporate into your own toolbox. But yeah, like it doesn't get any more advanced than the basics. So yeah, every skill level is welcome. Yeah, I can we can paint from this a little bit. Do you want to just can you send me the image so I don't have
Yeah,
you
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
distracted by your face?
Yeah, sorry. My beautiful face.
It's a good distraction. Yeah, and if anybody has any other questions too.
Send it to you on Instagram, I guess. Or wait, can I send it to you through here? I'll do Instagram.
Can you send it to me on Discord? Maybe that would be
Oh yeah,
easiest.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, man. You're a true teacher. You were talking like for 2 hours straight, like without much breathing.
Did I?
Pretty.
I kind of blacked out a little bit. I don't remember most.
That's hard to do. uh, do you ever
Actually,
like? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I know nothing about painting. I just kind of memorized all of that, and now I don't know anything else.
Have you guys actually ever seen him really paint? It's a conspiracy.
What were you gonna say before I interrupted?
Um, I don't know, some bullshit about like, do you drink honey tea or something to keep your voice going?
Yeah, I'm kind of losing a little bit, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have to restart Photoshop because it's so angry at me. If I keep it open too long, it just quits.
Oh, really? Well, you can use heavy paint if you want. It's got a. You can import images now.
No. I'm not the biggest fan of that app or the
Oh
creator.
no! My worst nightmare. Oh, how do I get both of us on here? Wait. I'm seeing your Discord.
No, wait, I think that's your
Or is that my
Discord.
Discord? Oh, it is my Discord.
Yeah, am
Wait.
I not sharing anymore?
Oh, yes,
We
you are.
trying to get both.
I see. There you are. Here we are.
Thoughts about color and Montreal people. Yeah, I would love to. You know, when the world gets back to normal, I'd love to go out and do some plein air. Thoughts on color? Yeah, I don't really. I think more about value, and I think more about how color relates to value, and how kind of color is value. That's all. They're all one and the same. And it's the same stuff we've been talking about of how to design with it. It's all groups and contrast. I mean, there's like the technical side of color, of materials and light, and why we see certain colors. Then once you find those resulting colors, how do you design with them? Oh wait, so now I see my screen, but can we get both of them?
Yeah, we got both screens up now.
Okay, I think I'm just a little bit behind.
We got all of us. The reference, you and me. Technology.
I'll put my reference on the
Do you like? I like painting from older photos because they are compressed. You
Yeah,
feel like that
and
too?
yeah, and they don't have color information, so you have to make it up. I
Oh
love doing
yeah,
that.
yeah. Do you ever? I have this one book called 100 Years of Photojournalism, and it has like the most epic black and white photos of all this stuff, like war photos and
Google.
political photos, and it's awesome. So many great compositions.
I bought a book in a while, maybe actually.
I've done like a bajillion. All those photos are great.
Is it this, the time book?
Uh, that looks similar, but that's not the cover that I have. Mine is like orange and it has Queen Elizabeth on it or
I can
something.
get it for
1 cent.
less than a cent.
Okay, that might work. That looks about right.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can budget out that less than a cent purchase.
Okay, I feel like I'm already screwing this up.
I think at the point you understand values, the beginner next challenge is to see values in color. It's kind of the opposite. You learn to see color in value because the values are certain colors, if that makes sense.
I'm actually excited to paint now, because like I feel like I've had these things in the back of my head, but not really explicitly laid out so much, like how you've been doing today. So I'm kind of excited to test this
That's
stuff
awesome.
out. Yeah,
I'm excited to see the paintings you make.
yeah. I'm gonna try to get
I
some
think
Devin juice in there.
you're
Um,
like you're so good at this stuff. Like I'm always amazed like the type of compression that you put into your work and like the design and stuff. Like you're never like copying the reference or anything. There's always tons of these decisions happening and like really accurate relationships between groups. So I
I
don't know if it wasn't intentional, then I don't know.
I feel like I feel comfortable with accuracy, but what I don't feel comfortable with is design in painting. And it's weird because I feel comfortable with design with drawing and like shapes, like designing a mech or a vehicle or whatever. But for some reason, like landscapes, I just can't force myself to like change what's in front of me. I don't know why.
Right.
It's like
Well,
this
maybe the
weird
solution,
rule. Hmm.
maybe like not thinking of them as so different, because really there is no difference between painting and drawing. Uh, they are like parts of the same thing. So if you can do it in one thing, it's probably more of like a mental shift than any kind of technique difference. Have
Maybe
you
that's
read
kind of
Harold
weird.
Speed's book?
No, I haven't.
That might be helpful. I'll throw it up on my screen if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get it for free on Archive. The this it has a lot of those ideas about like painting and drawing being kind of the same thing.
Cool. Oh, you know what's crazy is, well, actually no, this is a stupid thing to say, but I feel like the programming stuff also feels the same somehow as
No,
the
yeah, like
painting.
anything I think that has to do with organizing information uses these principles.
Yeah. So that book is called Science of Drawing.
The practice and science of drawing.
So, do you have any top secret things that you learned from dentist school that nobody in the general public knows?
No, I think like I did have a lot of classes on like perception. I learned a lot about like, how the cells in your eyes and stuff work. A lot of that stuff I've forgotten for the most part, but That kind of comes in handy. And like, yeah, I took a lot of psychology classes, and a lot of what I do in my mentorships like is kind of talking about feelings and stuff sometimes. So it kind of comes in handy.
Oh man.
Just having kind of an awareness of that stuff.
Yeah, you never know. That stuff will come back. Marcelino says paint some teeth. Well, you paint teeth, right? Or skulls at least.
Yeah, maybe not
That
like
have teeth.
exclusively teeth. I don't know if I've ever made it the subject of my. Well, no, I did once. I did a spit paint years ago where the subject was a million teeth, I think. That was probably the only painting I did with
Whoa.
the subject being the teeth.
Could make a book about like anatomy of teeth for artists, or maybe not. I don't know.
Really, really niche market.
Yeah. He's really big at the tooth art conventions, guys. He's like the,
Yeah, most popular booth
leading
there.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be like tooth models, right? Like for all those
Yeah.
Colgate commercials.
Maybe that was my calling.
Yeah. Have you talked to Ramon lately? I haven't heard from him in a while.
Yeah, I think he's just been kind of busy, but we catch up every once in a while.
Yeah.
I know he's teaching his workshops.
Yeah, I remember him like for a while like trying to figure out what to do and just being sort of transitioning between stuff, and he's like teaching at all these schools and stuff, and I feel like happy that he's seems like he's got like his groove going now. It's
Right.
all
He
like happening.
really
Yeah.
seems to have kind of found his niche.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think like if you're interested in learning anatomy or oil painting or 19th century drawing techniques, he is the best teacher that you could go to. So, uh, yeah, if that's something you're interested in, you can check that out.
Yeah. He's actually the one who got me back into like traditional painting, cuz I hadn't painted since school, and then um my girlfriend set me up on a man date with him, and we went to Griffith Park and painted, and like I was like, "Oh wow, this is kind of fun. Oil is cool."
Yeah, I really want to get out there and paint with you guys.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, we have this group called Weekend Warriors. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's like our thing. I mean, they're on Discord too. If you ever wanna
Is
just
that
do
is that the
like,
Warrior Painters group?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in there. I post every once in a while.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah, the plein air guys. It's cool how like painting seems to be kind of a thing now, at least in the area where I don't know, it's kind of becoming more popular, I guess.
You mean among like digital artists or in general?
I guess so. Like at least in animation, among animation artists and in this area, like yeah, now a lot of people are going out and painting a lot, and it's nice. I think I'm gonna try to leave out the blacks here on this picture because I don't like how crunchy they are.
Right, yeah, so you're going to compress things in a different way. But then, so if you make a decision like that, all you have to do is be consistent with that decision, and then it'll work.
Yeah. I feel like I should make this smaller too. Keep getting
Yeah.
sucked in.
So I mean, you can see kind of the dithering concept in this reference, where all these leaves, you kind of have to compress those into readable shapes.
Yeah, just like make a big polygon out of them, sort of. Like,
Right.
just that's where it goes. I really like how close some of the values are, like the background mountains to the midground. They're
Yeah,
pretty damn close.
often in photos that gets kind of pushed a bit. So like the tree would be like way darker than the background,
Yeah.
but yeah, this photo kind of retains that.
This is a very sensual photo, I think. You don't think so?
No, I think you're right. I just wouldn't have thought of describing it that way.
Hmm.
What gives it its sensuousness?
The colors, like, it's gentle. It's very gentle. It's not like attacking your eyeballs. It's like caressing. It's whooshing over smoothly and softly,
Serenity,
sensually, right? No?
lighting some candles. Yeah.
You know how some pictures just hurt your eyeballs? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the contrast isn't like it looks like a really old picture. It looks like film that was scanned.
Yeah. Looks like an old album cover or something. Some hippie music or some.
The green that I chose for the tree seems different than in the photo. Yeah, like I might build up to kind of that amount of saturation, but for the most part, like you don't have to get literally the decisions, and you don't have to literally get the photo. As long as I can make the tree this, but as long as I make the shadow the correct distance away from that and the correct temperature away from that, again, like Vaughn is doing with changing the relationships, you could do whatever you want because it's again about taking notes about the relationships and not so much copying what you see.
Would you say that you are the boss of the painting? Or the
Yeah,
painting
yeah,
is the
you want to
boss
like
of
you
you?
want to have the decisions come from you.
Sometimes I let the painting just walk all over me, you know? And then it's just. I need to get better at. Yeah.
Standing up for yourself.
Command. Yeah.
I'm letting it bully you.
Well, I think somebody was asking a question like a million years ago about how you got your first job at Gameloft.
My first job at Gameloft, my studio job. Uh, yeah, I had a connection there who recommended me. That's kind of how I got. Then I don't think they would have given me an interview, but I kind of showed up in Montreal and was like, "Hey, I'm in town." Like wink, wink, and then they gave me an interview. Yeah, I don't think it actually would have happened unless I showed up here.
Did you show up just for the job, or were you there for like another thing?
My girlfriend at the time was moving here to go to McGill,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I moved up here to help her find an apartment and like move in and stuff. And it was kind of stressful because like, yeah, obviously I wanted to move to Montreal with her, and I had an interview to like allow that to happen. So basically, like there was a lot riding on that interview, so I was very stressed out about it. I was like, if I screw this up, like my girlfriend's gonna move to Montreal and I'm gonna be stuck in New Jersey.
Oh
And
shit!
yeah, luckily it worked out. I mean, the relationship didn't work out, but that worked out.
All right. Were you
But
like
yeah, like, I'm really happy here in Montreal, and I'm really glad that that happened.
better than New
So
Jersey, eh?
yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to stay here.
I'm sorry that you're from New Jersey. I'm just
That's
kidding.
okay.
I'm kidding.
That's my cross to bear. I'm not gonna put that on you.
Oh no. He's blaming it on me. What do I do?
Where were you born?
I was born in Miami, but I grew up a little bit in Long Island, um, and Miami,
Oh, really? So
mostly.
you had like East Coast stuff?
Yeah, yeah. My dad's family is all like Connecticut and New Jersey and
Oh,
New
wow.
York and yeah.
My condolences.
I like it. I like all that
Yeah,
stuff.
uh, just ragging on it. Yeah, I like the East Coast. So are you happy in LA? Like, would you?
I think it's cool. I like it. It's a lot more Asian than Miami is, for sure. uh, but I mean, I could be anywhere basically. I don't really need to be in any one
Yeah,
spot.
same here. I don't really like know what to do with that information yet. That's like the first time I'm able to be anywhere. I still live like right next to Game Loft, and it feels a little bit weird.
Yeah. I see you outside the window. Just.
Wave to them at lunch.
Yeah. It's. I mean, the teacher life is actually pretty nice though, right? Like, you can just go wave to your old coworkers at lunch if you
Yeah, I
wanted
love
to.
it.
Oh, Muftak is asking what made you leave Gameloft.
Yeah, I was let go when COVID started. They cut the whole team,
Oh wow.
and I was
So
like terrified of that because I felt like I love it here in Montreal, and like what's going to happen? Am I going to be kicked out and sent back to New Jersey? But no, I'm allowed to stay here until my visa's up, so I'm trying to get like permanent residency and stuff. But it was great because like it was the perfect time to start focusing more on my teaching, and I'd already started doing that a little bit when I was at Game Loft, but the timing kind of worked out where I really seamlessly kind of transitioned into what I'm doing now. And I'm way happier doing this.
yeah, yeah, that is kind of perfect. Like it's a really good thing that you had started earlier, right? So like you were kind of ready or prepared for it.
I didn't. I just kind of like slipped into this new thing that I was already. I had the time really to focus on it more too, and everybody else was home and like wanted to learn online. It like, yeah, it worked out.
So what was the moment that you started to think like, hey, maybe I can teach online and do that as a living?
Um, So I had started like when I was working, I started posting like tutorials on Twitter about some of this stuff, and yeah, that started to do pretty well. And I think I started doing the mentorships and was doing them after work. Like after I got home from work, I would have a student, and then I released my book, and that did really well. And I was like, oh, okay, like there's a lot of interest in this, and I can, yeah. And then so many people were home and wanting to learn, so like, yeah, it just kind of naturally turned into this full time thing, and I didn't really have any room to like be nervous about it, which I feel really grateful for.
Yeah, just happened. Um, hmm. did you did you like know going into Twitter and stuff that you would eventually try to do teaching stuff, or did that just happen
No,
after?
I really had no idea. I think this is important that like I just enjoyed teaching. I had like throughout all of my learning and stuff, I would always be in like forums and stuff and giving critiques to people and like helping other people out. And I figured like, I might as well kind of share this with a little bit of a larger audience. And I had no idea if there would be any interest or anything.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I'm also grateful that there was interest in it because it's just something that I enjoy doing and I would be doing anyway. And I think that's the important thing. Like if you want to figure out what you should be doing, yeah, like think about first what do you enjoy and then just focus on that. And a lot of the stuff comes automatically with enough time and like luck, time, dedication.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you have, like earlier you were saying that you feel uncomfortable with larger groups settings like for teaching and stuff, but I mean, just from watching you here, you seem like pretty comfortable with your when you're in your teacher mode, you seem to be pretty comfortable, going ahead and leading everybody through what you're trying to convey.
Uh, yeah, so maybe I should just do it. I mean, like part of the reason why I do like working one-on-one is because you can get that like direct connection with somebody and help them specifically. So I tend to get more fulfillment out of that, I guess, versus like a group of people. But yeah, that is something I want to move into, and also because like my teaching schedule is just getting really booked up, and like I need to logistically figure out other things to be able to do.
Yeah.
How's your painting coming along?
I'm psyched about it. Although I am falling into the trap of just copying what I see now, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think just omitting the darks feels really nice. It makes it feel more true to like that mood, I guess, of just
I
soft.
see a tiny thumbnail of what you're working on, but it looks good.
Thanks. How about you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not thinking too critically about what I'm doing. Yeah, I like all the temperature stuff you've got going on. I feel like I want to get some of that.
Yeah, this picture has some really nice atmosphere because it's like the stuff that's going farther back turns purple instead of turning blue,
All right.
which is kind of weird, but I like it. And also like how the road turns, it turns purple and then green and then yellow and then green and then purple. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely feel like you're more attuned to these small color changes, and I tend to like be grabbed more by the value stuff.
It's that RGB life, man. RGB.
That's the thing. I think maybe I should like smudge some of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's what I need. I need some smudge in my life.
That smudge life. Yeah, people in chat are saying you should just do it. That's what they said for you to do your class, right?
Oh, for a group class?
Yeah, they're like, just do it. Send it.
I mean, what would you guys be most interested in terms of a group class? Like a group mentorship where it's kind of, I don't know how that would work, or like a theme kind of thing of like digital portrait painting or something. Because yeah, just kind of like managing what the topic week to week is. I don't know. I guess I could do kind of a group mentorship.
I feel like a class just drilling in the stuff you talked about today would be really cool. Where we just like go over a lot of practical examples of it and try it out a bunch of times. I don't know. Let's see what these guys say. I think seeing you go through the process of making a painting, each step would be awesome. And then the students could make their own.
Yeah, that would be doable. When you're making tools for heavy paint, like where do you kind of get your inspiration for? Okay, I'm gonna make like the fill gradient tool.
Well, fill gradient is actually a tool that I've never seen in any other tool. So
Yeah,
that one is actually original. And the reason why is because I was trying to do a regular airbrush and I couldn't figure it out. So fill gradient was like something I kind of discovered by accident, and I was like, oh shit, this would be useful for like shadows and stuff. So yeah, fill gradient was sort of a accident. But I'm pretty proud of that because it is a novel thing, I believe.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting, like the intentions of kind of the designer of the tool versus then how the artist is using it. It's like guitar pedals, where like a lot of them are kind of used in ways that the engineer did not intend. But you're both the engineer and the artist.
But still, people will use stuff in ways that I would never imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no way to predict everything, and that's good. I like when people like figure out stuff that I wouldn't have thought of. Pretty exciting. But I do feel like it would be it is very valuable to be using the product that you're working on, that you're designing, like
Right.
like hardcore using it, because there's just lots of little things that I would never even think about unless I run into them in the practice of doing the thing, you know? So,
Right.
like,
Yeah, you need to kind of run into those usability things on your own.
yep. Like, it would be really hard if I had an engineer friend and then I was like trying to explain to him what I needed it to do, and then he would do it and then he'd give it to me and then I'd be like playing with it. I'm like, oh, that's not really right, and have to explain
Right.
again what I need. It's sort of like that's sort of like how I feel with 3D modeling too, because the reason why I learned 3D modeling is because I had a job where I had to do a lot of orthographic drawings, and send them to 3D modelers so that they could model the shape. And I ended up like going back and forth and doing notes for them so often and so much that I was like, you know what, it's faster if I just learn how to do this myself. Instead of, there's so much like lost in translation, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just skip that whole thing. Do you get a lot of students who are trying to get into like video game stuff, or is it mostly more fine arts type?
I would say it's mostly there's a mix of concept artists, people who want to do illustration, and fine artists.
Oh,
Probably like mostly illustrators and concept artists, and then a little bit of fine artists. And I've had some people who only do like traditional work for homework. So I'll just be there like painting over traditional stuff in Photoshop. Yeah, we're not talking about any kind of technique stuff because I don't know, I couldn't really help too much with like specific oil painting techniques, but it's the same kind of principles. So yeah, I always find that interesting. It's like somebody who doesn't even have any interest in digital painting.
They just want your brain juice. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
I think I've had that like once or twice where people will be like, "I want to take your Blender class, but not in Blender. Can I use
Oh
Maya
yeah.
instead?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"What?" uh,
Have you done it?
I don't think so. I would like just be like, "No, don't do that, please."
Yeah, that's a little different. That's like
Yeah,
specifically about a tool.
yeah. That's like, can I take your class about using a hammer, but I'm gonna use a spoon?
Like, maybe.
You could, but I don't think
You
you're
know,
gonna have a good time.
creative you could get with it.
This is kind of random, but do you know Anis Naim?
I think so.
He's a fellow New Jerseyite. If you ever, I don't know
Oh,
if
really?
yeah, I don't know if
How do
New
you
Jersey, I don't know if New Jersey people are attracted to each other, but Anis like Annis
Nae?
Naem. Yeah, he
Yeah,
does.
another New Jersey to LA.
Yeah, yeah, he does blender and painting too, but more
Yeah,
on the concept art side of things.
New Jersey people gotta stick together. We are bound through space and time.
Your father was a New Jerseyite, and his father before him. We come from a long line of dentists, us Korwins.
Seriously, you're not too far from the truth about New Jersey.
Was your grandpa a dentist too?
No, my grandpa was an engineer.
Oh, okay, that's where you get it from.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, both my grandparents were fine artists, or my grandmothers.
They were what?
They were both fine artists.
Oh,
Yeah, so on my dad's side and my mom's side, they were both oil painters.
that's crazy.
Yeah, my dad, before he was a dentist, he was a jeweler. So yeah, he would like design and cast like metal jewelry and stuff. I think a
Nice.
lot of the skills, like like the motor skills and stuff, are pretty relevant.
Well, I mean, like, there's a lot of 3D printer people now doing jewelry. So jewelry
Yeah,
is like all high tech now.
yeah.
Or back in the stuff. That's cool. Yeah.
For translating concepts into 3D, do you feel that pipelines are being consolidated into fewer roles as tech becomes more approachable for artists? Hmm, I'm not sure. I don't know if I know about enough about like the pipeline stuff, but probably.
Oh, uh, I could say yeah, yeah. Like, I think more and more concept artists are doing 3D stuff.
Like 3D, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
To
becoming.
like production levels also.
Mm-hmm.
Like when does a concept stop being a concept and start being a production thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's how like pretty much all the last projects I've worked on have been. Pretty much no difference. it's the same. Like the models that we work on end up in the show. Philip Hogg says Phil Gradient is my alter ego, like PHIL. That's great. Should have like a mascot. The mascot of Heavy Paint can be Phil Gradient. I find myself questioning what the difference is between the roles. Well, the concept artist will probably have a little more freedom and leeway, and then the production artist will probably be more like just modeling something that's already designed. Although that's not always true. Sometimes the production artists kind of design also.
Right. So yeah, like concept artists will do production stuff, and production 3D artists will also sometimes concept while they're doing the production model.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I like the composition you like made it taller. That does look cool.
I'm kind of just like pushing paint around at this point. Yeah, this is around the point I'd probably stop when I'm like not improving anything.
Yeah. I'm gonna copy you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was like looking at the temperature stuff you're doing and like wanting to copy that.
Well, I like this composition better. The longer composition.
Yeah, yours kind of feels like morning light. Do you think this photo was like sunset or sunrise?
Sunset? Is what I was imagining? What do you think? How do you even tell?
I don't know. I always wondered like what the exact difference is, because shouldn't like the colors be the same? I think I heard that like depending on the amount of water vapor in the air has an effect.
That's too nerdy, man.
Yeah, or like
it's too much
dust and stuff from like the work of the day getting into the atmosphere.
Jeez. It's the cows. The cows sneezes.
Cow sneezes of a good
The cow sneezes of the day, mixing with the bird droppings. The east wind.
If there's one takeaway from this, I think it's cow sneezes and bird droppings.
Yeah. We gotta come up with the catchphrase for you sometime, or the windmill, the Korwin turbine. No, I don't know. Never mind.
Turbine?
I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm saying.
No, that's perfect.
All right. Well, I think I learned a lot this session, and this was another kind of a crazy long one, which I wasn't expecting, but like we covered a lot of stuff today. So yeah, I hope everyone here had a good time hanging out, learning and stuff, and I hope you'll if you didn't know Devin, now you know him. And you check out all his stuff.
Yeah, I have wares if
Sure. Yeah. Check. I mean, yeah, we got links in the description too for Devin. His website's there.
Yeah, again, I have books and goodies. And
oh yeah, a sorrow head blender, a sorrow head.
Oh yeah, and I have this like reference plane head thing. I can open that up.
Which is
and then otherwise, what's up?
I was just saying it's a lot more affordable than an actual Asaro head, which I didn't realize how expensive they are.
With shipping and everything, it's like pretty expensive. So I want the next best thing. I've engaged cycles. My computer
Oh
may die.
no.
There's
Oh
no one
no.
doing.
Oh god.
Let's let that happen. Yeah,
Oh
and if you
wait.
want to follow me in places, I have an Instagram.
Yeah.
Uh,
Follow him
I
in
have
places.
I have a Twitter as well, where
He's
I
using this
post.
crazy thing called Twitter.
I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's this new thing.
It's this crazy new thing.
I'm telling you, it's gonna really take off and be a force in global politics one day.
Yeah,
But for
you
now,
get.
it's very helpful.
Yeah, you guys should get on it before it explodes. Um, all right. Well, yeah. Thank you again, Devin. This was pretty cool. Glad to have had the chance to sit down with you. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Bye bye, everybody. Have a good.